Trail End is a town that lives up to its name. It's a sleepy hamlet nestled between the banks of the Tennessee River and the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. During the warmer months, it caters to all types of outdoorsy folks looking to leave civilization behind for a long weekend. A year ago, I was one of those weekend warriors. I couldn't wait to get lost in the woods for a few days and feel the restorative healing of Mother Nature work its charms on my battered psyche. Back then, my life was in shambles. I had graduated college with massive student loan debt and a few prospects in my chosen field. I applied to every job that fit my degree but couldn't even land an interview. Needing money, I took a day job to help pay the bills until I could find something more permanent. 6 months later, I was still at my day job, and most of my prospects had dried up. Worse, the stress from my day job was eating my soul. I loved my coworkers, but management, as usual, was the worst. Every encounter, no matter how benign, left you feeling emotionally drained. The daily onslaught of being micromanaged into the ground was enough to make you want to jump out of the building. I'll give our company credit for one thing. They made the office building windows hard to break, and thus they saved countless lives. On top of that, my significant other Charlie and I were at an inflection point. We both were pondering the future, and only one of us was curious if it included the other person. In our best moments, our bickering was playful and fun. But lately, that had all started to curdle into bitterness and anger. Suddenly, my home went from being a refuge to a black hole of suck. At the time, it felt like my life was darkening. I wasn't sure if I had a light to see my way out. Our trip to Trail End was very much needed for a multitude of reasons. I was hoping to not only unwind and relax in the woods, but also to reconnect. If the trip went well, my relationship had a fighting chance. I didn't want to think about what lay ahead if things went sideways. We drove up together in my old beater. Now, I love my car, whom I lovingly referred to as Deep Blue for reasons lost to me, but my better half was not a fan. In fact, they were confident that Deep Blue couldn't handle the drive. I wouldn't hear it. Was Deep Blue ugly? Well, yes she was. Did she have over 200,000 miles on it? Of course she did. Was she loud and had a constant check engine light glowing? All classic cars do. But I believed in her. Despite my initial confidence, I was worried Deep Blue might not have the oomph needed to push ahead as the roads inclined. Thank God for small miracles, though. The old girl pulled through. Our cabin was in the middle of nowhere and looked like it was built during Abraham Lincoln's lifetime, but it was better than a tent. The interiors of the place were a touch better, but not by much. The perk of the place was a big river rock fireplace and a surprisingly comfortable king-sized bed. The condition of the cabin was a secondary concern for the trip. The real beauty was the view. From the cabin's front porch, you had a view of a golden valley filled with tall sweet grass that swayed in the breeze. There was a wooden walkway that cut through the grass and led down to the banks of the river. It was a sight to behold. On the opposite side of the valley was a dense piney woods, so thick with trees that got dark hours before the rest of the valley did. When the wind blew, you could hear it push through the millions of pine needles, and it sounded like the ocean. If you closed your eyes, you could trick your brain into thinking that you were near the beach. It was the self that I needed to help heal me. As we brought in everything from Deep Blue and set up the cabin, we thought that we should head down into town and grab some supplies. We needed the essentials: chocolate, marshmallows, and graham crackers, but also like real food, water, and beer. I was going to grab a couple of cords of wood for both the fire pit outside and that inviting fireplace inside. I could already feel the tension melting away. Charlie and I both could. We stopped at Eddie's shack, the local general store, and picked up everything that we would need for the long weekend. It was fun, actually. We joked around like we had at the start of the relationship. Nobody put on airs. We were goofy and lovey and remembered that we still liked one another. If this was a portent of the weekend ahead, I was ecstatic. And then we met Eddie. Eddie was straight from small-town central casting. He was older, though how old, who could tell? His salt and pepper hair was tucked underneath a weathered Bass Pro Shop trucker's hat. He wore a red and black plaid shirt that looked well worn with black suspenders pinning it down to his shoulders. Honest to God, when we saw him, he was whittling a block of wood into the shape of an old-timey truck. "The city folk," Eddie asked without looking up. "How can you tell?" I asked. He just laughed. I stole the glance with my partner and rolled my eyes. "Where are you staying?" "The cabin up near Chimney Valley," I said. "A nice spot. You up to fish, hunt, or camp?" "Relax," I said. "A good place to do that." "Well, aren't you two a good-looking pair?" Eddie said, finally looking up. We both blushed a bit. "Thank you," Charlie said with a smirk. "I think so too." "You ever been up this way before?" Eddie asked, finally putting down his whittling and ringing up our supplies. "Nope," I said. "First time." "Beautiful country," he said. "It really is amazing," Charlie said. "We're above the Whippoorwill Trail. I can't wait to walk through that field. So many pretty wildflowers." "Yeah, I saw some pictures on Instagram of the fireflies in the field at night," I added. "I think we should walk down there later and see it firsthand." Eddie chuckled to himself and shook his head. "Not as good as advertised?" "Oh no, it's pretty enough," he said. "But if I were you, I wouldn't go wandering in the valley at night. Not at all." "What, wild animals?" Charlie offered. Things like that, but not that," came the reply. "What does that mean?" I asked. "You have any idea how old those woods are? That mountain range? It's older than Jesus himself," Eddie said, adding another whistle. "Older than the good Lord and deeper and darker than the pits below itself. Lots of things out there that we don't know about." I looked at Charlie and my eyes screamed. We should leave, but Charlie wasn't quite ready. I saw that inquisitive look on their face and knew that we weren't going anywhere. Charlie had been hooked by Eddie's ramblings. "But you're only thinking on one thing out there, right?" Charlie asked. Eddie nodded as he bagged the marshmallows. "Yep, I'm thinking of one specific creature that I would avoid." "Are there others that you would invite in for tea?" I asked, trying to bring a little levity to a story that was taking a bleak turn. Eddie laughed. "Nah, not really. Besides, I'm not a tea drinker myself. More of a bourbon man." "What's the creature?" Charlie asked. "Well, they come as fireflies," Eddie said as he put the chocolate bars in the bag. "But they don't stay that way. That's how they get around, how they blend in. Once they change, though, hoo boy." I wanted to say that I don't remember seeing any monsters on the Insta-feed, but thought the remark would arrive at DOA. Plus, I wasn't sure that I wanted to learn more about these creatures or stories about these creatures. I know how my brain works. Later tonight, when Charlie inevitably falls asleep before me, I'll be stressing out about firefly monsters. "What is it?" Charlie asked again. Eddie looked up. His lower lip was bumped out from dip. His teeth bore the telltale staining of a habitual user. He looked at Charlie dead in the eyes and said, "The Maymen." "What the heck are the Maymen?" Well, I don't know exactly, but I do know to stay away from them. What do you know? Are they people? I asked, dreading the answer. Well, in a way yes, and in a way no, he said. I hear they look like a person but taller, and their eyes glow green, and that's how they blend in with the fireflies. But that ain't the worst part. We waited with bated breath, but Eddie just handed over our bags and said, That'll be $22.35. I reached for my wallet, but Charlie knocked my arm down. Eddie, what's the worst part? Oh, he said, they got long blades for arms, and once they spot you, he trailed off. And do they follow? Oh yes, Eddie said, spitting into a little styrofoam cup. Need to get near a fire to keep them at bay, or so I'm told. Again, I ain't ever seen one for myself. Well, I wouldn't want to either, I said, handing over some cash to Eddie. If you got a fireplace in your cabin, he said, handing me my change. I'd keep a fire burning just in case. They can't use doors, but they can come down chimneys. Maybe I'll take another cord of wood then, I said, handing over a $5. You have a good one now, okay? Enjoy Mother Nature. She's a beautiful woman. We hustled out of the store and let Eddie return to his whittling. We stayed quiet for the first 10 minutes in Deep Blue, but I knew that it wouldn't last. Charlie was busting at the seams. The heck was that back there? Charlie finally blurted out. Oh man, I have no clue. The Maymen. They come as fireflies, I said, doing my best to mimic Eddie's voice. The review of my attempt was sudden. Charlie blanched and gave me a thumbs down. Yeah, that was rough. Hey, it's a work in progress, I countered. You think there is anything? No, I said before Charlie finished speaking. There are some backwoods stories designed by bored people to scare off tourists. Did it work? Charlie said, needling me. No, I lied. I don't think Eddie is a reliable narrator. Charlie laughed. Probably not. Hey, did you grab some booze back there? Yup. Why? It was Charlie's turn to mimic Eddie's voice. Well, I ain't much of a tea drinker myself. I'm a bourbon man. I glanced over at Charlie and nodded. Yeah, the impression was spot on. Of course it was, it always is. Charlie laughed and I did too. It was nice. When we got back to the cabin with some daylight still left, I wanted to get an early jump on dinner, but Charlie wanted to hit the trail before it got too dark. You don't want to walk in the river. I do, but, dinner. It'll be here when we get back. Should I start a fire? Prep a fire, Charlie countered. And let's hope the Maymen leave your perfectly balanced wood alone. Oh, so funny, I said and went about setting up the fire in the fireplace. It was a smart idea to get this prepped. The walk through the valley to the river was longer than Charlie had thought, and we would both be starving by the time that we got back. Every little time saver helped avoid hunger taking hold. There was a wooden staircase from the cabin's property that led down about 50 stairs to Chimney Valley. The landing at the bottom was split into 3 different trails. The most popular and longest was the Whippoorwill Trail. It was a raised boardwalk that zigzagged through the tall grass and flowers of the valley and deposited you to the banks of the Tennessee River. The walk was stunning. As you descend the stairs, you can smell the valley below you. The rush of the river is audible from so far out, and that noise mixes so well with the calls of birds and buzzing of bees. The valley was blooming and countless wildflowers of different colors were all around us. You were surrounded by life, and it was mesmerizing. We got down to the river and dipped our toes in. The water was freezing, so we decided to try to tackle the swim tomorrow. We sat at the water's edge and just talked and connected with one another. It was what I needed. It was what I craved. It was also time-consuming though. Before we realized it, the sun had started to set. We really didn't want to hike up those stairs in the dark, so we started back towards the cabin. Despite our best efforts, I assumed that the night would catch up with us. When the sun sets behind the woods, it gets dark almost instantly. I couldn't help but think of Eddie telling us that these woods were deeper and darker than the pits below itself. By the time that we were halfway home, it was clear we would be doing most of this hike in the dark. It was okay though, because the valley was just as beautiful in the evening. A wind picked up and the tall grass around us rolled like ocean waves in the breeze. There were more stars overhead than I had ever seen before. You could still hear the rush of the river, constant and calming. Charlie and I held hands and slowly walked along the boardwalk. "This feels like a dream," Charlie said. "I can't tell you how much I needed this." "We needed this," Charlie corrected. "Yeah, we needed this," I echoed. We slowed our pace and just enjoyed being with each other. Charlie rested his head on my shoulder and we strolled along the boardwalk. I couldn't see the stairs, but I knew that we were getting close. The thought of climbing old, rickety wooden stairs in the pitch black was not appealing. "Look," Charlie yelled, pointing out into the grass. "My God, there are so many of them." I turned and saw the glowing lights of fireflies all around us. Green and yellow lights winked in the darkness. There had to have been thousands. It instantly transported me to my childhood. I spent summers on my grandparents' farm out in the country, and at night, I would stare out at the pastures as the fireflies arrived. I put my arm around Charlie and I gave a squeeze. "This is incredible," I said softly. "I'm so glad that we came down here tonight." "Yeah, me too." "I gotta get a picture," Charlie said, pulling out a phone. "Get close and I'll get a selfie with the fireflies in the background." "Oh, for the gram," I said sarcastically. Charlie ignored me and held up the phone and snapped a photo. Unfortunately, the auto flash was on, and the burst of light nearly blinded us. "Ah," I said, rubbing my eyes. "Hey, my bad," Charlie said, trying to sound sincere but also laughing. "That was dumb of me." "Yeah, auto flash off," I said. "Sorry," Charlie said, switching it off. "I'll put it on night mode so it'll get everything, but you have to stand still for a few." "I'll manage." We tried again, and this time we weren't blinded by the light. Charlie pulled up the photo and gave a little squeal of approval. "Look at how many fireflies there are." I took the phone and I looked at the photo. We were surrounded by fireflies all around us. It really was an incredible photo. I always admired just how good Charlie was at taking photos. Even though it was just a selfie, Charlie managed to get so much depth to the shot. I was about to return the phone when something in the photo had caught my eye. I zoomed in on the space between Charlie and me and felt my body freeze. There were two fireflies between us in the shot, or I thought they were fireflies. On closer inspection, they were eyes. Somebody was standing on the boardwalk behind us. I didn't want to say it out loud, but I needed to tell Charlie. I pulled up the memo pad and started typing. Charlie was confused. "Hey, I was going to post this on Insta," Charlie said. I held up the screen. All I wrote was, "Somebody's behind us." In the faint glow of the phone, I saw Charlie's face go from bliss to horrified. Charlie took the phone from me and typed, "Are you sure?" I pulled up the photo and handed the phone over. Charlie looked at the photo and his jaw dropped. The phone started shaking. I grabbed Charlie's hands and held them. I tried my best to calm us both down. I leaned in close and whispered, "On 3, we run." "Okay," Charlie said, their voice shaking. "Is that a Mayman?" "I don't want to stick around to find out. You ready?" Charlie nodded and pocketed the phone. "Don't look back, just run for the stairs, okay? 1, 2, 3. We both took off like a rocket. At first, all I heard was our footsteps slapping against the boardwalk, and I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I heard the high-pitched scream bellow from behind us. I felt it climb up my spine and lodge in my brain. I've never run so fast in my life. "What the heck is that?" Charlie screamed. "Just run." Charlie got to the stairs first and started taking them 2 at a time. I was worried that the weather-beaten stairs might break from us running up them, but it was a secondary concern at this point. From behind us, the creature was gaining speed. Its footsteps were violent when they hit the boardwalk. Worse, something was clearly digging into the wood with each step that the monster took. Something sharp like a knife. I suddenly remembered Eddie mentioning blade arms. "Keep going." I could feel the entire staircase shaking as we dashed up it. If these steps gave out, we'd be done. The only other way out of the valley was the river, and that way was blocked now. I was about 2/3 of the way up when Charlie had made it to the top. "Hurry up," Charlie pleaded. "Go inside the cabin," I yelled. "I'm right behind you." Charlie waited a second and then took off. I was nearing the top of the stairs when I felt the stairs shake below me. I looked back and saw those green eyes staring up at me. The Maymen screamed again, and I put my hands over my ears to muffle the noise. It was like it was piercing my brain. The moon came up from behind a cloud, and in a fleeting second, I saw the light reflect off the arms of the creature. Eddie hadn't been mistaken. The creature had blades for arms. I watched as they dug into the wooden stairs and helped the Mayman launch up 4 stairs at once. It was time to move. I hurried up the last few steps and reached the top in a flash. Charlie was standing in the cabin's doorway pleading for me to hurry. I could hear the Mayman launching up more stairs and knew that we had limited time. I ran over to Charlie, who was frantic at this point. I slammed the door behind us and locked it. I glanced around the room and saw the big bed. That would block anyone from opening the door. "The bed," I said, and Charlie knew exactly what I had planned. We dragged the big thing in front of the door and pressed against it. We were bracing for the Mayman to crash into the cabin. "What the heck is happening?" Charlie asked. "I don't know, but we're safe inside." "Are we?" "I have to believe that," I admitted. When the Mayman reached the top of the stairs, it bellowed again. We both covered our ears. The scream echoed across the valley. I had a hard time believing that everyone in Trail End didn't hear it. We waited for the creature to start battering the door, but nothing happened. I glanced up from behind the bed and looked through the windows to see if I could spot the creature, but I didn't see anything. I knew that it was out there, but where was it? Suddenly I heard something, a thump on the roof. It had launched itself up there, but why? Why not take the... And then I remembered what Eddie had said about chimneys. "It's going to come down the chimney," I said out loud to myself. "Fire," Charlie said. "I need a lighter, give me a lighter." Charlie fished his pockets for a few seconds and pulled out an old Zippo. I snagged it and made my way to the fireplace. Above me, I heard the Mayman struggle to find its footing on the slanted roof, but it was clear where they were heading. When I got to the fireplace, I remembered that I had set up a fire already. I started laughing at my dumb luck. My hands trembled as I tried to flick the wheel on the Zippo, trying to get a flame going. "Come on, come on." The Mayman reached the top of the chimney and let out another yell. I was so scared that I dropped the Zippo. "Come on," I said, scooping it back up and frantically spinning the flint. It would spark, but no flame caught. "Come on, light already, you piece of crap." I heard the blade arms dig into the river rock at the top of the chimney. The Mayman would be inside the cabin in a matter of seconds, and we had blocked off the only way in and out. My heart raced. I could feel my blood rushing in my veins. My fingers desperately tried to coax the flame out of the Zippo. I could hear the Mayman push its large body into the chimney. I would be face to face with it in an instant. "Come on," Charlie yelled. "I'm trying." I could hear the blades dig into the rock and the massive body inch forward. The Mayman screamed again, and I could feel the sound waves blast my hair back. A trickle of blood came out of my left ear, but I ignored it. I pressed down hard on the wheel and spun it so hard that it left the gear-like indention in my thumb. But it worked. The spark finally caught. I had a flame. Just as I saw the tip of the blade reach the fireplace opening, I dropped the Zippo into the instant start hay, kindling and watching the fire ignite. The Mayman screamed again, but this wasn't the same as before. It was in pain. The blade retreated, and I heard the body start to shuffle up the chimney to escape the glowing fire. I heard it reach the top of the chimney again and scream. It dug its blade arms into the roof and launched itself into the darkness of the woods. As quickly as it had arrived, it was gone. I laid back on the ground and started laughing. I didn't know what else to do. Charlie crawled over to me and we laid in each other's arms. We didn't say a word for the longest time. We just embraced, and I knew then that I loved Charlie. "I think this is what they mean by the restorative healing of Mother Nature," I asked. Charlie started cracking up. I joined in. We laid there for a few minutes more, laughing and coming down from the adrenaline spike. This was not the relaxing trip that I had hoped for. Eventually, as expected, Charlie fell asleep first. I stayed up the rest of the night, feeding the fire and ensuring the light never went out. Sometime around dawn, I dozed off for a spell, but the sunlight streaming through the windows woke me up. Charlie woke up and stretched out. "We okay?" "Right as rain," I said with an exhausted sigh. "We're leaving, right?" "Heck yes," I said. We pushed the bed back in place and packed our bags up. I lit one of the last logs like a torch and I opened the door. I didn't think the Mayman was there, but I didn't want to be caught off guard either. I felt dumb holding it, but I didn't care. "I can drive first," Charlie offered, and I instantly agreed. I needed to get some real sleep. I could feel the weariness in my bones that I'd be out in 5 seconds into the drive. Charlie loaded up the last of the bags and slammed Deep Blue's hatchback door closed. "Think this girl will make it home?" "I never doubt Deep Blue." "You're the only one," Charlie said with a wink as we entered the car. I walked over to the outdoor fire pit to put down my torch when I heard something shuffling at the edge of the woods. I gripped the log tight in my hands. I assumed that these creatures only moved around at night, but I had no idea if that was true. "Start the car," I yelled over my shoulder. I could hear Charlie turning the key in the engine struggling to catch. Another turn and the engine sputtered, but it did not start. A third time with the same result. Charlie leaned out the window. Could anything else go wrong? And that's when we heard the Mayman scream. It burst out from the woods in front of me. It arsed in the sky, heading right towards me. Time slowed down as the monster descended on me. I heard Charlie yell. I heard the car struggle to start again. I saw the sun reflect off the blade arms that were a mere feet away from my body, and I saw my reflection in those firefly eyes. I also remembered that I was holding a torch. As soon as the Mayman was a foot from me, I slammed the torch into its face. The creature screamed and went up like it was soaked in gasoline. It crashed into me, but I kicked it off and scrambled to my feet. I dashed to the car and slid inside. "Go, go, go." Charlie cranked the key. Nothing. Cranked again. Nothing. Cranked a third time. Nothing. "I hate you, Deep Blue." I looked in the rearview and saw the Mayman, fully engulfed in flames, steady themselves and try to stand back up. I patted Deep Blue on the dash and whispered, "Come on, girl, for me." Charlie cranked the key again and the engine caught. It roared to life. In a second, Charlie shifted into drive and floored the pedal, and we fishtailed on the dirt road, but the tires caught and we flew down the mountain. "You're getting a new car," Charlie said. "Deep Blue's had a good run, but come on." "Yeah, I know," I answered. "I know." We didn't stop driving for 3 hours. We both flipped off the welcome to trail end sign as we drove past. It was safe to say that we would never be coming back. Against the odds, things improved after the trip. I think when you face death, it helps you put things into perspective. Charlie and I had a long talk and decided that we wanted to stay together, and we're still going strong. Work got better too once I learned to leave the BS at the office. I'm still struggling to find my dream job, but this is America. We're all struggling. Last night, after Charlie fell asleep during the movie that we were watching on Netflix, I went out to our balcony and I watched the city below. The noise of the city isn't as comforting as the wind through the pine needles, but it has its charms. I took a sip of my beer and let the noise enrapture me. And then I heard it. A scream. The Maymen scream. I snapped back up and scanned the area, but I didn't see anything. No fireflies, no blade arms, nothing. Maybe I was hearing things. I must have been. I saw it burn. I probably had PTSD from the encounter. Regardless, I went back inside and turned on our propane fireplace. If it came back, I would finish the job. I burned you once, I thought. I'll do it again. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. With prices going up on just about everything lately, being smart with your money isn't just a good idea, it's essential. But managing subscriptions, tracking spending, and cutting costs can feel overwhelming. Lucky for you, Rocket Money takes the guesswork out of it so that you can easily make smart decisions. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. See all of your subscriptions in one place and know exactly where your money is going to. For ones you don't want anymore, Rocket Money can help you cancel them. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Download the Rocket Money app and enter my show name, Creepscast, in the survey so that they know I sent you. Don't wait. Download the Rocket Money app today and tell them that you heard about them from my show. It was just another normal walk. That's how it started anyway. A casual morning stroll on the forested trail that ran behind my parents' house. They own a home on a couple acres in the small town of Skyline, Alabama. At the time, I was in between jobs and had been living with them as I tried to get back on my feet. Their property intersects with a winding trail that ran for miles through some unkempt woods in the boonies. In the morning, the Appalachian hills would come alive with the songs of birds and fluttering of insects. The crimson sunrise would paint a beautiful portrait as it filtered down through the bristling leaves of aspen and spruce trees. There was something about the place that just made me feel at peace. It was like all the stress and anxiety of modern-day worries just faded away. It was my Zen place, until the day it was shattered forever. The day it happened, I woke up a bit before dawn, had my coffee, and went out for an early morning walk. The sun had just begun to creep over the horizon when I left the house. I hadn't planned on being gone any longer than an hour, and had only been walking about 15 minutes when I noticed something strange. The path around me was oddly silent, with the only noise coming from the sounds of my own footsteps against the gravel. The usual sounds of the woodland creatures or the wind gently rustling the trees were absent. Everything was just completely silent. It didn't really bother me at first, but the longer that it went on, the stranger it seemed. I finally stopped to try and determine whether it was some auditory illusion of some kind. I listened for any of the usual sounds. Cars on the highway a few miles out, lawnmowers fired up by the neighbors, or just any noise at all. But there was nothing, just silence. All of a sudden, I began to feel lightheaded. My vision started swimming and my knees grew wobbly beneath me. The hairs on my arms stood on end and a cold sweat dampened my brow. I didn't understand what was happening, but in seconds, I was struggling just to remain standing. Panic struck hard, and I desperately reached for my phone thinking that I was having a medical emergency. I never managed to reach it, and I just seemed to lose all control of my body and fall face first to the ground. I still don't know exactly what happened, but it must have been a seizure or a fainting spell of some kind. What I do know is that when I finally came to, I wasn't where I was before. The environment was pitch black and suddenly cold. Only when I struggled and felt my knee knock into something solid did I realize that I was awake. The sudden jolt struck right on the funny bone, causing me to wince out in pain. I tried to reach my hand out to rub the aching nerve, but found that I couldn't. There was something restricting my movement, something cold and covered in a sticky substance. My whole body was pinned vertically against a wall. Thankfully, the binds were not entirely restrictive, and I managed to finagle the cell phone out of my pocket. I flipped it open and the light glowed in the dark. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to see where I was at, and that's when the true dread set in. As far as I could tell, I was in some sort of underground tunnel. The binds that restricted me looked almost like the roots of trees. They felt different though, more like dried mud than a plant. They were grayish in color and coated with random splotches of this greenish and black goo. It was sticky like tree sap, and it hung in gobs of tendrils from all over that smelled truly foul. I almost had a panic attack in that moment, as I realized I had absolutely no idea where I was or how I had gotten there. My initial thought was that there was some weird cave-in or earthquake, which somehow led to me ending up where I did. I shined my phone up at the ceiling but saw only the rigid outline of the rocky walls, no fissure or gap that I could have slid through, and thus that potential explanation died a quick, unceremonious death. My next thought was that I had been abducted by someone. I thought about yelling for help, but if that were true, then I doubted they would be likely to come to my aid. I realized an explanation in that moment was not nearly as important as actually getting out. After wiggling back and forth a bit, it was clear that it wasn't going to be enough to escape. I shined the phone around the corridor using what little lighting it provided to try and formulate a plan. I caught a break when the light gleamed off of some shiny metallic object only a few feet to my right. It was too far for my hand to reach, and so I extended my right foot out as much as I could. After struggling for a few minutes, I finally managed to dig my heel down on top of it and drag it back towards me. I then managed to press it against the wall and move it vertical so that I could reach it with my hand. It was some sort of bent iron rod. I didn't know how it had possibly gotten down there, but I was nonetheless happy it had. After slowly wedging it into one of the rods, I managed to push outward and cause it to crack. The roots, or whatever they were, crumbled with relative ease. A few of them broke away, and within a couple of moments, I managed to push my arm free. Soon after, I managed to slide my entire body up and out of the hole that I had created. Somehow it was only then that I remembered my phone was good for something besides shining a flashlight. I dialed 911, but to no surprise the call didn't go through. That seemed another confirmation that I was somewhere underground, but I had no way of telling how deep. I realized then that in all likelihood, nobody was coming to find me. The time on my phone read 11:48 a.m., meaning that I had been out cold for nearly 6 hours. I had most of the same clothes on, a pair of tan cargo shorts and my running shoes. The only thing missing was my crimson Alabama University hoodie. After looking around, I saw no sign of it. The air felt chilly and stagnant, and I shuddered as I rubbed the goosebumps on my exposed arms. Other than my thin layer of clothing, I also had my phone, a Leatherman multi-tool, keys, a pack of gum, and chapstick. Not exactly a wilderness survival expert's emergency pack. The corridor was unnervingly silent, devoid of any cave ambience. No howling wind leaking in cracks or distant drips of water. Just silence, intrusive and all-consuming. I started to walk, squinting to try and maximize my ocular reception under the minimal light of my cell phone. Each footstep I took, I did so with the utmost caution that I was capable of. It felt as though every sense in my body had been hypercharged from the onset of adrenaline and confusion. Before leaving the area, I had one last look back at the root system that had formerly imprisoned me. A thought struck me then as I observed it from further away. It almost looked like some sort of primitive cage. The tunnel stretched on for dozens of yards. Along the ground, I started finding tufts of what appeared to be dried grass and straw randomly strewn about. Beyond that, the tunnel came to a bend to the left and the trail of grass continued towards it. Once around the corner, my eyes were met with the sight of an open cavern. In the waning light of my flip phone, it was difficult to tell, but it was clearly of much greater volume than the previous tunnel. In front of me was a large pile of sticks and dried grass, similar to what I had seen earlier. Beyond that, the walls came to a sort of arch that briefly narrowed at 24 yards ahead of me, before seeming to expand out again in the next chamber. On top of the stone arch was a structure almost resembling a natural limestone bridge that seemed to connect two separate ledges some 30 feet above me. Above that, there appeared to be another open space, but once again my lack of proficient lighting made it difficult to tell. I tiptoed into the first section of the cave, keeping my head on a swivel. I reached the pile of debris and decided to dig within it to see if there was anything useful. After finding a long stick a moment later, an idea blossomed in my mind. I collected a few twigs and cut a long vertical strip off my belt with my pocket knife. I then removed both of my boots and socks. I fashioned the socks into a sort of pouch, stuffed them with grass and twigs, and then slipped it over the end of the stick. Once it seemed suitable enough, I took out my pack of gum and popped a piece in, while cutting the wrapper in a way to make it one long strand of foil. I bunched the foil into a cluster and popped the battery out of my cell phone. I placed the torch end in a pile of brush and then moved the foil cluster beneath it. Carefully, I took the two ends of the stripped foil and pressed one to each of the battery's terminals. In seconds, the strand began to smoke, and then burst into a small flame in the brush. The flame took to the dry grass quickly, and I watched the crimson hue dance along the pile. Thank you, Boy Scouts. Don't know what I would have done without that little trick. A second later, my makeshift torch is ignited. The flame grew stronger, penetrating further into the shadowy canopy around me. The panic in my mind diminished ever so slightly, as the orange glow of the torch painted an encouraging trail through the dark. As I turned to my left, my torch glinted off something upon the cave wall that caught my eye. I thought for sure that I had seen it wrong, but as I got closer, a series of distinct shapes came into view. On the porous gray rock about 4 feet off the ground were a series of cave paintings. They started low and spread for at least 12 feet up the side of the wall. There were all sorts of things depicted. Most were little more than scrawny stick figure drawings of people, but there were a few animals as well. One scene that stood out from the others 3 tall figures were drawn above a horizontal line, and 3 shorter ones were drawn down below it. The way the scene was centered on the wall made it seem significant, but I didn't understand why. The torch was burning quickly, so I maneuvered forward into the large open chamber beyond the archway. The fallen column above the arch appeared to bridge the gap between 2 rising ledges about 30 feet up. The way it was wedged made it look like it was done so intentionally, like somebody carved it out of the rock. The roof of the cavern beyond the structure appeared to curl upwards, and I wondered whether there was more to see. I stepped beyond it and felt my jaw nearly hit the floor as I got my answer. The room beyond the arch transitioned abruptly into an absolutely colossal chamber that appeared to extend upward for at least several hundred feet. Suddenly, it was bright enough to see without the torch, and I knew that meant light had to be filtering in from somewhere at the top. That realization provided hope, but also disbelief. How far underground was I? The chamber branched out at various points into countless winding passages, and pieces of rock ran overhead as makeshift bridges, looking like enormous veins in a massive stone organ. In the center was a massive center spire of rock that seemed to stretch all the way to the top. Many of the veins were connected to it, making it seem like a sort of central anchor. Something then suddenly moved a couple hundred feet up. I didn't see what it was, but I heard pebbles shuffle and plunge from above. They hit the ground with thunderous clacks, sounding like popcorn popping through a megaphone. Not knowing what had caused it, not exactly yearning to find out, I ducked back underneath the arch. I waited there for a minute or so but didn't hear any further noise. It was clear then that I wasn't alone down there. A metallic gleam shone then caught my attention from the brush pile in front of me. After looking closer, I recognized the distinct shape of a long barrel jutting out from underneath the pile. Part of me couldn't even believe what I was seeing, but as I got nearer and pulled it out, things just got even stranger. It was a musket, old school, flintlock kind, like one from the Manifest Destiny era. It was in poor condition and obviously wouldn't be suitable for self-defense except maybe as a vulgar club, but that wasn't what held my attention. If it was authentic and judging from the advanced rust on the hide it seemed like it could have been, then it had to be nearly 200 years old. After digging around for a few more moments, I quickly stumbled upon other treasures. An old leather belt, an Adidas sneaker, a broken machete, a knapsack, and finally, a bone. I dropped it as soon as I realized what it was that it was holding. It looked like a large thigh bone from an animal, probably a horse or a moose. An extremely worrying thought then entered my head, one which sprouted goosebumps along my arms. I glanced around at the environment, seeing the large gathered pile of sticks and other things. The way the bundles were arranged made it almost look like it was some kind of nest. Even then it seemed like a ridiculous notion. The pile was at least 30 feet in diameter. There's no creature on Earth that makes a nest that big, at least not that I know of. I couldn't calm my nerves after that though, and decided to just continue trying to move upwards and reach the top, and more importantly the light. Once past the pile, I found myself faced with a series of 3 branching tunnels. One of them appeared to slope downward, and after a moment of contemplation, I decided to just take the one on the far left that veered up. My torch began to dim, and I did everything I could to maintain the flame for as long as possible. My pockets soon began to run dry of grass, and the cave once again grew dark. After a couple more seconds, it was little more than smoldering ashes. Once again, I found myself alone in the dark. I grabbed the cell phone from my pocket and silently debated whether or not to go back for more fuel. An awful stench then accosted my nostrils like the malaise of a polluted rolling tide. It smelled like sewage and rotten eggs. The scent became so overwhelming that I felt my eyes begin to water and bile climb in my throat. Along with the noxious scent was an overwhelming sense of impending doom. Like my olfactory senses had triggered something deep, a primal fear hidden deep within my subconscious. I flipped open my phone and prayed my gut was wrong. The light from it barely made a difference, but it was enough to confirm my worst fear. I nearly dropped the phone as the outline of a decaying human hand became visible further down the corridor. Out of instinct, I took a step back and covered my mouth as I retched. Unfortunately, there was no real choice aside from proceeding. I popped in a fresh piece of gum and prayed that my eyes had deceived me as I stepped forward. It was even worse up close than even my imagination had built it up to be. Partially skeletonized hands and legs dangling with gangrene ribbons of flesh attached to a rotting corpse seated against the wall. Blackened intestines spewed from the gut like dead worms from some grotesque and moldy fruit. The head was missing entirely, and there was no indication as to where it had gone. My instincts were all but begging me to flee. I had every intention of doing so too until I saw a small knapsack on the ground beside the remains. On a hunch, it may provide something useful, and seeing as how the person clearly no longer had any use for it, I decided to take it. Once I lugged it onto my back, I said a few parting words for the nameless corpse and I moved on. As if it wasn't obvious before, that moment was when I truly realized the severity of my situation. Before that, I had almost assured myself that me waking up there was some kind of mistake or odd coincidence, but after seeing that, I abandoned that idea. Anxiety constricted my mind as I wondered whether I had been kidnapped by some perverse serial killer, chained up like a pig ready for slaughter, whenever he thought to entertain the notion. After putting sufficient distance between myself and the corpse, I knelt down and popped open the knapsack. Inside, I struck gold with a flashlight, a box of matches, a half-full water bottle, a pack of granola bars, and a few magazines. Those were all most welcome additions, but much to my chagrin, there was nothing to identify who the person was or how they had gotten there. At least the flashlight still had some juice left in it. I flicked the switch and watched the flashlight sputter to life and blaze a trail through the passage. The tunnel was pretty unremarkable, appearing as just a long winding passage that led upward. Ever since the brush pile, I hadn't heard so much as a single decibel of sound. I never really realized how comfortable background white noise is until I was forced to go without it. After a couple more minutes of walking in utter silence, I reached another open chamber. Two more branching passages lay further ahead and seemed to stretch in nearly opposing directions. One branched out left and one right, with both seeming to lead upwards. As I approached the two passages and then noticed there was another directly above me on the ceiling, I looked up to see an extended chute, stretching for countless feet above me. Even the light of the flashlight was not enough to illuminate its entire length. Obviously, I had no means of traversing the vertical shaft, but the discovery made things even more mystifying. I elected to take the left-hand tunnel in hopes that it would lead to a higher level of the cavern. Before I could enter one of them, though, my footstep disrupted a pile of pebbles and sent them skittering outward across the ground. I froze, cursing myself for the noise and hoping nothing had been alerted by it. My mind was flooded with a torrent of catastrophic thoughts. It felt like breaking the silence within that place was somehow a graven sin in and of itself. Luckily for me, there was no other noises. The further I went, the less likely it seemed like the cave was a natural formation. The walls had almost patterned groove marks in them, as if something had methodically yet boorishly dug them out. A worrying thought manifested as I remembered the apparent nest from earlier. Maybe this was the den of some massive, unknown creature. For some reason I thought of Shelob, The giant spider from the Lord of the Rings, and obviously, that thought did not bring any comfort whatsoever. It seemed ridiculous, of course, but darkness and silence can play cruel tricks on a solitary mind. I hope that's all it was, and I did my best to suppress them and continue on. I dropped a piece of gum at the entrance of the next tunnel and continued walking. The idea was to use the glint of the shiny wrapper from the flashlight as a rudimentary map to help me find my way back to where I started if it came down to that. The more I went through, the more I doubted and hoped that I would not have to resort to that tactic. All sense of direction in that place was restricted to a bare minimum. As with even as short as I had traveled, I had no real sense of where I was in relation to where I had started. That tunnel seemed to bend and twist, like an enclosed spiral staircase on an endless incline. Finally, as I rounded yet another bend, I saw a dull light breaching the other end. I ventured forward, and once more the room elongated into that massive open chamber. There were some unusual items spread across the ground there as well. Splintered pieces of wood, along with a half-destroyed wooden chair. There was also a scattering of copper-colored coins across the ground, but I didn't recognize the denomination. However, one item stood out right away, an old rusted sword. I made my way over and knelt to inspect it on the ground. It looked like an old cavalry saber from the Civil War era. The hilt was rounded and encrusted with bronze, and the metal blade had clearly seen better years. It looked authentic, like the rifle from earlier, but of course that would lead to the quite elaborate conclusion that it had been there for a couple 100 years. I didn't think much about it in the moment though. I was just happy to have a weapon. Hello? A sudden voice froze me up like a breeze in the dead of winter. I killed the flashlight and ducked down. Hello, anyone? The ethereal voice sounded like a young girl calling from somewhere within the cave. Her vocal inflection quite clearly conveyed her terror, and I felt my heart quiver. The thought of a young girl alone in that place and terrified was haunting, and my instincts demanded that I try to help. I crept onward from the room and found myself once more entering the massive chamber from earlier, this time on a higher level. The cavern loomed large with an ancient empty tomb, and felt as though I were a single ant in an alien termite colony. Down below I heard the sounds of the girl whimpering, and I approached the ledge to try and spot her. The area beneath me was shrouded in shadow, and I saw nothing upon first glance. I debated upon turning my flashlight back on and shining down, but some part of me wouldn't comply with the thought. Like I knew it was the right thing to do, but fear had constricted me, and it wouldn't allow my hand to cooperate. I peeked over the edge, waiting in the darkness to try and see her. Her hushed sobs and frantic breathing met my ears, but I couldn't determine exactly where they were coming from. I kept quiet and continued listening, but something strange then happened. Her muffled cries changed to pitch and suddenly morphed into what I can only describe as a hooting, almost a manic animal screech. It was the weirdest thing that I had ever heard. Something then suddenly darted through the darkness down below me. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was quick. It disappeared in a split second, and I was forced to entertain a ridiculous notion. Maybe those sounds were not meant to signal distress. Maybe it was a lure. I can't exactly say why that unnerving thought entered my mind, but I picked up the pace a bit from then on. I crossed a fallen column to reach a higher elevation of ledges, sneaking glances down below to keep an eye out for whatever that thing was. Luckily, I managed to cross without incident, and kept maneuvering further into the convoluted cave system. Every path which seemed to incline upwards was the one that I took. At every tunnel I took, I left another piece of the wrapped gum at the entryway, and the pack continued to dwindle. Most corridors and rooms that I came to held very little of interest. found a few empty piles of animal bones as well as various personal belongings scattered around. The items I found in no particular order were an old briefcase, a torn pair of jeans, a Solo winter boot, a Chicago Cubs baseball hat, and a lunchbox with spoiled contents. All of it was rather asinine, but then I came to that room. It was tucked away behind a large room that split into several other paths. By this point, I was at least several hundred feet above where I had started. The room itself was little more than a small separate grotto, but the items that I found inside were truly interesting. Most were articles of clothing, shirts, jackets, pants, hats and shoes of all sorts, numbering in the hundreds. I also saw a cane, a fishing pole, a baseball bat, a deflated football, and a small drink cooler. All the items in that room seemingly had a single thing in common. They all were either entirely or primarily red. It looked as though somebody had collected all of them over the years, and some of the articles and items looked decades old at the very least. I kept my new saber clutched tightly as I waded my way through the debris. I was then struck by the epiphany that my suspiciously absent hoodie had also been red. I looked around for it briefly, but I didn't find it. It got me thinking though, maybe red was the reason that I was there in the first place. Of course, I knew by then that I was not alone in the cave, and likely had been abducted to arrive there by someone or something. Maybe whatever had taken me didn't like red, or maybe they were attracted to it. Back outside, and I was once again met with another fallen column that led up to another higher ledge. This one was different though, incredibly steep and worn. There appeared to be no easy way up and no other real path to follow. I could see the light growing more luminous from above and knew the steep path was my only option to reach it. I stashed the sword on the back of my belt and began to climb. The rocks were slick and parts of them crumbled as I grabbed. I moved slowly, trying to stay both alive and quiet as much as possible. The road was tough, but I pushed on. I was nearing the halfway point when something stopped me dead in my tracks. Somewhere far above, I heard the sounds of pebbles tumbling down the cavern slopes. I looked up and saw a dusty cloud of residue blossom off the cavern wall. My eyes rapidly scanned the area above, but I didn't see anything that could have caused it. I was just about to continue when I spotted something strange. The dull light was filtering in from above, just barely illuminating the cavern. It was in that mystical twilight canopy that I saw it. On the far wall there was a small spot where the light appeared to shimmer in an odd fashion. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first, and I just stared at the odd image. It almost looked like something translucent was partially obscuring the light, like an impossible patch of water held together by some unknown force. I must have blinked or something, because one moment it was there and the next it was gone. A cold chill swept down my spine, and I decided the best thing that I could do was just keep moving. After taking a moment to level out my breaths, I continued onward, and thankfully, I reached the next ledge. Once I hauled myself up, I peered back down over the ledge and saw the chamber plunge downward into obscurity. By that point, I was nearing the top where the light was coming from. I just hoped that all the effort to get there would be worth it. The room beyond that ledge was yet another empty space, or at least I thought it was. Once inside, my flashlight gleamed off one of the walls and illuminated several patterns on the rock. The entire thing appeared haphazardly scrawled in some sort of black ink. It was only when I backed further away from the wall that I realized what it was. At first, I saw only squiggled lines, bloated ovals, and winding tubes. And then I saw the X carved into one side. A realization struck me then. It was a map. It was crudely made, but after further examination, I recognized that the X section was similar to the cavern that I was in. The pathways drawn also seemed to vaguely reflect the ones that I had taken to reach that point. My eyes grew wide as I made the undeniable discovery that if the map was in any way accurate, then I hadn't seen anything yet. The colossal chamber that I was currently in was only a tiny fraction of the entire piece. I counted 6 or 7 other sections that were at least double the size. The ends of the portrait seemed to fizzle away, as if whoever had drawn it had not yet completed the entire thing. That realization was staggering. Just how big is this place? I took a picture of the diagram with my cell phone and moved on. There were sudden noises and clangs far off in the distance, and I decided to move towards the light as quick as I could. According to the crude map, the way out of the labyrinth was near. If it was anywhere near true proportions, then I was already about 3/4 of the way there. I just had a little bit higher to go, but the worst was yet to come. I advanced onto yet another tunnel and began the arduous climb upward. I could see the light getting nearer, and I just hoped there was an actual means of getting out. Luckily, after rounding a few corners, I came face to face with just about the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen: the exit. In the ceiling, there were several partially transparent films of unknown material stretched over holes. The light was gently beaming in from above, and I knew it had to be the way out. The only question was how I was going to reach it, as the ceiling was well over 20 feet up. I made my approach into the open cavern and stared upwards at the patches in the rock above me. There were grooves and indentations in the side of the wall, and I thought that I may use them to climb up. It looked possible, but I didn't get the chance to try then. Out of the blue, I was suddenly struck in the chest by something. The blow was sudden, completely unexpected and sharp. I crumpled to my knees and held my ribs where the blow had struck, feeling blood begin to spill from several open wounds on my abdomen. I then heard the sudden pitter-patter of feet scampering by me. My eyes frantically darted around the room, but I did not see my assaulter anywhere, even though he had passed right by me. It didn't make any sense. A plume of dust was then disturbed above me. I looked up and saw something that I still cannot fully explain. It was the same odd shimmering anomaly of the light that I had seen before. It was closer this time, perched just above me on the ceiling. It was different than before though. There was a distinct shape to it, at least partially, like it looked different than the area around it. For anyone who's played the Halo franchise, just picture the translucent silhouette of an active camo upgrade, and that's basically how it looked. Something that was either partially cloaked or my eyes just weren't capable of fully perceiving it. It then moved and my heart dropped like a lead weight. There was definitely something up there and I had no idea what it was. Its outline looked vaguely humanoid, but it was hard to tell for certain. The saber in my hand quivered as I held it out towards the thing. The 3 separate wounds on my chest stung like hornet's venom, and I realized then that the pattern of them almost looked like something inflicted by claws. We just stared at one another for the longest time, before it suddenly made this sort of hooting noise. I then watched as it leapt away several feet and then disappeared into the shadows. Things fell silent once more and I seized my chance. Freedom was only a simple climb away, and with that in mind, I made a scramble for it. I began my climb up the wall. It was jagged and I felt rocks puncture into my hands, but I didn't care. I just had to get out. I was nearly the halfway point when something suddenly slammed into my back. The impact caused me to lose my grip and plummet about 10 feet back down to the cavern floor. I struck hard with my head bouncing off the solid dirt. The room wobbled around me and my head pulsed from the impact. Something then touched down ahead of me. I tried to stabilize my vision and clutched tightly onto the rusted saber as my only means of defense. As I rose to my feet though, I felt the thing slam into me. The 2 of us fell and rolled onto the dirt, wrestling and flailing about. Its claws were like razors and piranha-like teeth tore my flesh into ribbons. I fought back and struggled, somehow managing to force the thing off of me. I could barely even see what I was fighting, but as we broke apart and it tried to slink back into the shadows, I saw blood shining on its torso. I took a step forward and slashed horizontally with the saber. I felt the tip striking tear through its translucent hide. It seemed only like a minor wound, but the thing went ballistic. I can't even possibly describe the multi-layered cacophony that the thing produced. Voices and animals all blended into random blurbs of vocalized pain. It flailed about, wailing in a god-awful tone, as if suddenly driven to utter madness by what was honestly just a minor wound, or perhaps stumble over the ledge and plummet into the chasm below. It struck with a hard squelch a second later and the silence returned. It didn't last though, and before I could even ask myself what had happened, I heard something down below. It began as a chorus of hoots, grunts, and indistinct noises. I heard pebbles scuttling about, and the aggravated voices grew in volume. There were more of them, many more of them. The only option that I had was the holes up above, and so once more I dashed towards the rock wall. I scrambled up as quick as I could as the horde of camouflaged things climbed from the abyss below. I heard them right beneath me as I reached the hole on the ceiling. There was some sort of thin film material covering the hole, but luckily I was able to push right through it. Daylight seared into my eyes as I plunged upward and burst out of the cave. The light accosted my retinas and it took a moment to adjust after being locked in darkness for so long. There were boulders around me and trees in the distance illuminated by a setting sun. Just as I was about to lunge outward, something grabbed a hold of my legs. I felt claws sink into my legs and tear into the flesh. I kicked and fought back with all the strength that I had left, refusing to be dragged back down into the cave without fighting. My fingernails cracked as I clung with all my might onto the ledge and kicked around wildly. By some miracle, I felt the thing's grip relinquish on my leg. I hobbled to my feet as the chorus of sounds wailed from below. My leg was bloodied, but the pain barely registered. Adrenaline had taken full control and I galloped into a run. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew that I had to get as far away from there as possible. I don't think I've ever ran for so long in my life. I heard them following behind me and I knew if I stopped for even a moment that I was dead. It was dark before I finally saw smoke wafting in the distance. With every last ounce of energy I possessed, I dashed towards it. The most beautiful sight that I had ever seen came into view then as a simple wooden cabin. I yelled out, hoping that somebody would hear my pleas and help me. Exhaustion and loss of blood struck me then, and I collapsed within a few dozen yards of the home. My vision began to fade, but I saw blurry outlines emerged from within the cabin. Things then went dark once again. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital greeted by the desperate expressions of family and friends. It was all so surreal. They wept tears of joy, thanking God and others that I had returned. Part of me wondered then whether all the things I've related here today were just nightmares or vivid hallucinations of some kind of coma. But as soon as I saw the extent of my injuries, I knew that wasn't possible. I had apparently been gone for nearly 24 hours when I was found. My body was covered in deep cuts and lacerations. I had 3 broken ribs and a partially ruptured spleen. Many of my wounds had been stricken with infection, and it took weeks for me to heal. It was not a fun time, but at least I was alive. The doctors and police thought that my injuries were the results of an animal attack. They questioned me profusely, but I took the coward's way out. I didn't tell them much, only that I was out hiking and was suddenly attacked by something. Doesn't really explain the fact that I ended up at the cabin, which was nearly 15 miles away from the trail that I had started on, but that detail didn't come up. It felt wrong to lie to them, but I was paranoid that no one would believe me. I didn't even know if I could believe myself. Ever since that day, I've exhausted every possible rational explanation, but they always come up short. The memories are just too vivid. I still don't understand exactly how it all happened, but I've learned a few things. After I got out of the hospital, I started doing some research on all of this phenomenon to try and see whether anybody has been through something similar. The Appalachians are known for cases of mysterious disappearances. Dozens of cases have been reported over the years, with many of them remaining unsolved. I don't know whether they were all victimized by the same thing that I was, but I did notice one peculiar detail. Many of them were reported to have been wearing a red article of clothing when they were declared missing. In nature, red is the color of danger. Many animals like bulls have an innate fear or dislike of the color. It makes sense when you think about it too. Blood is red, fire too. Oftentimes, venomous snakes and insects will be partially or entirely red in color. Many poisonous mushrooms and berries also follow this pattern. I'm not positive, but I do believe red has something to do with this. As for what those things are, I really don't know. I've considered everything from aliens to ghosts and interdimensional creatures, but I don't think anybody knows for sure. There's a local legend about beings that supposedly live deep in the woods, hidden away from people. Indigenous folklore in the area mentions them extensively, but it sounds ridiculous. Fairies. Nothing like the cutesy Tinkerbell or Cosmo and Wanda. According to legend, they are subterranean creatures that stalk and drag their prey back down to their burrows. A lot of stories claim they live near rocks and boulders, something which reminded me of the location that I arrived in after first exiting the cave. I didn't really buy into this explanation until a friend of mine who was Native American mentioned one particular detail. Apparently, these beings are allergic to steel. That may explain what happened to the one that attacked me after I had nicked it with that old saber. Maybe the steel of the blade caused it to have a reaction. As for their apparent ability to cloak themselves, well, no one who I've told this account to honestly has been able to explain that. My same friend who told me about the fairies admit that he never really believed in them. They were just stories that his grandfather used to tell him as a kid. Both of us don't really know what to think now. Some people say that all myths and superstitions are rooted in something real. Real but benign stories passed from generation to generation by word of mouth is spiced up and exaggerated upon, thus eventually leading to the folklore that we tell each other around campfires. Maybe this story, the myth, doesn't need to be exaggerated. Maybe the reason that the world scoffs at these stories is because the truth is very good at hiding. I know how all of this sounds, trust me. Every skeptical thought that has passed through your mind while reading this is probably something that I myself have considered at one point or another. If you choose to write this off as no more than fiction, then that is your decision. I've saved this for the end because I know there are those who skim through posts to see the conclusions. I want as many people to see this message as possible. It's the only thing that really matters. Please, don't wear red in the Appalachian woods or any other woods for that matter. You may not believe in or ever see the things that I have, and honestly, I hope you never do. But just remember, when you're out on a trail in the middle of the woods, they will see you. Don't provoke them, because even if you survive, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing a truth that no one will ever fully believe, just like me. In April 2022, my life hit rock bottom. The restaurant that I used to work at as a cook had just let me go, and finding another workplace was turning out to be a huge challenge. That was only the first blow. I was living with my boyfriend of 4 years at the time, and it was a happy relationship. Emphasis on was. I had always wanted to get married and start a family, and when I was laid off, I began to seriously think about my future. I was certain that Nico was the love of my life. He had always been there for me, and I knew I wanted to grow old with him. So I brought up the topic of marriage casually at the breakfast table. I didn't propose or anything. I was just hoping to get an assessment, to hear what he thought. His reaction was unexpected. He turned pale as a sheet. His jaw dropped, allowing half-chewed cereal to fall out and plop back into the bowl of milk that he had just spooned it out of. And then, ever so caringly, he explained to me that all that stuff about family and marriage wasn't really up his alley. So that was that. I couldn't imagine never getting to have kids. Now I know it's not for everybody, but it's just something that I've always wanted. Nico and I have spoken about it before when we first started dating, and he had always said that he hadn't made up his mind yet. Apparently over time he had. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he owed me anything. I wasn't even that mad, merely crushed. After we had broken up, Nico didn't want me living in the same place as him anymore, and seeing as I was unable to afford anything of my own, I had to move back in with my parents. I felt so pathetic. I kept looking for work, but to no avail. I had lost my job, my home, and the man that I loved, all in that 1 month of April. Then one day, my cousin Charlotte, or Lottie as she's more commonly called, came to visit me. "So, I heard you're not doing too well." Those were her first words to me. If a conversation starts like that, it's bound to be at least a little humiliating. It was true, but it stung nevertheless. "Good to know that word spread," I told her. "You'll be happy that it did later." She gave me a secretive smile over the cup of coffee in her hand. "Frank's father has just bought a huge stretch of land. It's very far away from here. The drive is going to take a few days, and it's apparently insanely beautiful. It's at the foot of some mountains, and there's woods too, though the property is basically wide open." Frank is Lottie's husband. She married rich and young right after high school. I wasn't sure where she was going with this thing about the mountains, but I felt a tiny pang of jealousy already. Though born and raised in the metropolis, I had never felt at home in big cities. For one, I'm extremely nearsighted and at the same time, hate wearing glasses or contacts, meaning that I'm either uncomfortable all day or always bumping into people. When I was little, my mom and dad would take me on nature vacations to get away from all the bustling masses. There I could walk around without my glasses all day long, even though I would trip over the occasional rock. Besides, the romantic in me loved the untouched landscapes. Fresh air and the smell of grass, flowers and wood have always had a way of making me relax like nothing else could. The sounds too. Winds blowing, leaves rustling, birds and insects chirping. Yeah, I think deep inside I had wanted to return to the great outdoors for a long time. And Lottie, having often accompanied me on those trips when we were little, appeared to remember. Her smile grew as she carried on. "Alright, this might sound a little crazy, but hear me out. Frank's dad, Robert, wants to move up there and build something from scratch. And he wants his family and some friends and acquaintances to come join him. Like the old settlers, kind of," I had asked. "Oh, sure, maybe. Anyways, it's pretty solitary, but not far off from civilization by any means. There's a large town nearby where Rob owns some businesses, so he would get us work up there. He's been planning this for ages. He's this big, loaded guy, but he wants to live simpler, or pretend to at least. I've been up there with Frank to check out the place already, and it's incredible. There's no better view than what you have up there. It's bright, it's open. You would love it. So I'm telling you this obviously, because I figured you might be interested. Sure, we need to build the house first, so once we get there we'll be living in tents and huts for a while. But you're gonna have a bed and work and a bit of an adventure. And I'd like to have you there with me." At first, all I could say in response was a drawn-out, Lottie gave me an awkward chuckle as she twirled a strand of that flaxen hair around her finger. "I know it's a bit unconventional, but I'm really looking forward to it. We've rounded up a bunch of people, almost enough, and we'll be leaving this summer. I literally cannot wait. You'll love the others too. Some of them are kinda goofy but real nice. And you can cook, so they probably like you too. Now, I don't expect you to answer right now, but Would you at least think about it? I did. I thought about it for a long time. The idea of running off with my cousin, a group of strangers, and a rich guy who had blown a fuse might be questionable to most, but I had nothing to lose. This whole thing was outlandishly enticing. Finally, I decided to just do it and started packing up the few things that I thought that I would need. The first time I met the group of travelers was on a cool summer night, just a few hours after we were due to take our leave. I was itching with excitement as I stood there in the wide parking lot just outside the city, clinging to my small suitcase. It was 1 a.m. The sky was a rich blue, so dark that it was almost black. Since I didn't have a car myself, Lottie and Frank had picked me up from my parents' place and had taken me to the meeting spot. Rob, Frank's father, had already done all the planning. I hadn't met him or any of the other travelers in person yet, but Lottie had kept me up to date with all the most recent developments and had enthusiastically shown me pictures of the land. There was also a group chat that I had been a part of ever since I had told Lottie that I'd be coming along. So when the others came trickling in one by one, and we had exchanged greetings, they didn't feel like complete strangers. Apart from myself, Lottie, and Frank, there were Ruben, Jesse, Bill, Manuela, Rose, and Myrna. Ruben and Jesse were my age. Just like me, they had been let go, and while Jesse had a background in construction, Ruben used to be a ranch hand. He wasn't from the city, but had apparently made friends with Frank a few years back, which was how he came to join us. I envied him a little for all the time that he had gotten to spend outdoors. Bill was an older man and a direct acquaintance of Rob. He had money too, and just like Jesse, he used to be somewhere in the construction field, though I doubted that he did much of the muscle work. Manuela had just gone through a nasty divorce. She had walked away with a substantial sum and the strong desire to get as far away from the city as possible after her ex-husband's affair with his secretary had surfaced. Rose was a shepherdess, which I found exciting since I had never met a shepherdess before. She had left the city a long time ago but returned to join us. She had been working on a sheep ranch up to that point, and Rob wanted her to look after the sheep that he was planning on purchasing for his project. They knew each other through Myrna, who was Rob's girlfriend and Rose's sister. Unlike her sister, Myrna had never left the city and probably hadn't worked ever since she had gotten together with Rob. The only thing that we all had in common was how excited we were to leave. Robert was the last one to arrive. He pulled up in a large, expensive-looking truck, which in shape was similar to the one that Ruben had brought, just a lot bigger and fancier. He greeted Myrna with a kiss and the rest of us with a grand wave. "My friends," he began, sounding genuinely ecstatic. "It's so good to finally meet you all in person. This is going to be a long trip, so I do hope you all packed some snacks and something to drink. I've sent you the list of stops that we've scheduled for the ride. It's important that we get enough sleep and eat well. I don't want you arriving exhausted. I'll be taking the lead, but don't worry if any of you happen to fall behind at some point. We'll wait at the stops that we agreed upon for you to catch up with us. Okay, what else? Ruben and I have the tents on our trucks. We'll drive at nighttime as much as we can. The roads will be clearer. If everything goes smoothly, we'll be up in the mountains in 4 days. Alright folks, I believe we can get started." Jesse, Manuela, and I had agreed that we'd be taking the first part of the journey together in our SUV. She had placed a couple of bags under the passenger seat, so Jesse and I had slipped into the back. We drove in awkward yet comfortable silence at first, our minds occupied. There was a certain tension hanging above us, the restless, sweet tickling sensation of departure. I wasn't wearing my glasses at the time, so the man beside me looked a little blurry, his tan skin and black hair melting together into a distorted, flickering dark image. I had to squint, but when he turned to shoot me a quick smile, I saw it and I grinned back. I then felt around in my handbag for my glasses and quickly put them on. Probably taking this as his chance to break the silence, he cleared his throat before speaking up. "I'm kinda nervous. You two wanna talk?" "Me too," I confessed. grateful for his sincerity. Yeah, this is weird. I know, seeing you guys for the first time is nice though, Manuela said from the front seat. Sorry for being distant, it's nothing personal. I'm just not used to any of this. I noticed a very slight, silky accent swinging along in her voice. Curious, I asked her about it and she said that she had grown up in Madrid, and that's where her mother was from. We lingered on the topic of our origins for a while. Jesse and I were both from the city, born and bred. I'm just so sick of it, Jesse told us. All the noise and those dang lights. Kinda like it's forever noon. It didn't always bother me, but now it does. It suddenly started to really get on my nerves. The craziest thing, just like that. My grandpa died a little while back, and he always said that he wanted to get out of the city too. He never did. I don't want it to be like that for me. He shook his head and then drew himself up with an amused snort. I prefer the cursed ground. I don't care so long as it's outdoors. Cursed ground, I repeated, raising a brow. What? No one told you yet. Jesse sounded surprised, and I thought I was the last one to know everything. Oh, stop it, you, Manuela said, her voice rising in an angry, nearly motherly fashion, before softening again when addressing me. He's just talking about that little story that Frank made up to freak us out. Do you know him at all? He's kind of superstitious and loves telling ghost stories. So he came up with the rumor that the land is haunted or something. Not haunted, cursed. Jesse corrected her eagerly, enthusiasm sparking in his tone. Turning to me, he added, I don't think he made it up. I could tell that he wasn't being serious, but I still felt the tiniest bit of unease at these words. So what exactly did he say? Jesse lowered his voice conspiratorially. He says that he found marks on the trees there, old signs carved into the wood by someone marking their territory. He says the land might be inhabited already, but not by humans, and he thinks that if we take it for ourselves, we'll be punished. He fell silent before snorting with laughter. Hey, it's cool, I'm messing with you. Of course he made it up. He even said it so himself. He came up with it to scare Lottie, and that totally worked. But it kinda spooked you too, didn't it? I merely shrugged. I had probably only felt off because I was so nervous. Manuela threw me a glance in the rearview mirror, a knowing and understanding look on her face. Nothing wrong with feeling strange about all this, she assured me. Believe me, so do I. I've never been around so many people with as much money as you guys before, Jesse remarked, giving her a nod. I mean, there's you, Bill, Rob, Frank, and Lottie by extension. I guess Myrna too. Manuela, did you work? Well, in a way. My family was already well off, so I got a great education and studied art, and then got married. After that, I stayed at home but also painted and sold my works. It didn't make a lot of money, but it was still substantial and my own, you know. Can I see some of your art? I asked curiously, and Manuela gave me a sweet smile, saying that she would gladly show me some photos later. After that, conversation got a little more relaxed. Bit by bit, we began to feel more comfortable around one another, even a little like old friends. Manuela was kind and clever, with a motherly attitude that would occasionally surface when Jesse tried to scare me again. Jesse himself was friendly, warm and open in a way that made me think he was great around people, but I noticed that he could hardly keep still in his seat. He was either always tapping his foot or fumbling with his collar or playing games on his phone. We had been driving for about 2 hours when Manuela suddenly slowed down. I leaned forward to look over her shoulder from behind. The road in front of us was empty, except for Rob's car, which was just ahead of us. We were second in line, the others trailing after us. Is something wrong? I asked carefully. Did you just, never mind. I thought that I saw something. Manuela replied, shaking her head at herself. Saw what? I prodded. Oh, a fat badger or something. It was lying right there, but a trick of the light probably. Or maybe it was still alive, saw us coming and bolted. Jessie casually chimed in. Manuela sighed and mumbled something to herself about not having gotten enough sleep before speeding up again. Ruben's truck had already passed us, and Bill waved from the passenger seat as they drove by. How do you think they're getting on? I asked. Nah, just fine probably. Bill's sorta annoying, but Ruben's got a thick skin, Jessie replied, though I can't imagine they got a lot to talk about. Why is Bill in this anyways? I don't know. Guess he just hung around Rob a lot and caught the fever. We fell silent again and I leaned back in my seat, removing my glasses and allowing my eyes to rest for a moment. Manuela offered to get some blankets and pillows from the trunk, but I didn't really want to sleep, just relax a little. I listened to the radio, silently humming away in the background. Suddenly, I became aware of another sound, a low thumping noise seemingly coming from above me. I opened my eyes again, sliding on my glasses to look up, which of course was useless as I could hardly see through the car ceiling. You guys hear that just now? Hear what? Manuela asked, giving me a puzzled look in the rearview mirror. It sounded like something at the top of the car. I didn't hear it, Jessie said. There were some trees just now, could have been an acorn or something. I nodded and sank back into my seat in relief. Jessie laughed and asked if Frank's story had gotten to me. Turning to look outside the window, I noticed that Ruben's truck stood by the side of the road a little bit ahead of us. Ruben himself was leaning against it, a soda bottle in hand. He had probably stopped to stretch. I wasn't sure if he would hear, but I knocked against the glass and waved at him as we drove by. To my surprise, he raised his head, smiling at first as he recognized us, only for his face to fall all of a sudden. He turned his head after our car as the distance between us grew, and then actually began jogging along a few steps behind us, frantically motioning to me. Was that Ruben? Jessie asked sleepily. Yeah, I think something's wrong. I was interrupted by my cell phone ringing. I fumbled it out of my pocket. Like I had expected, it was Ruben calling. I hurriedly answered, and before I could even say a word of greeting, he spoke up in a grave, husky voice. Stop the car. What? Stop the car. Tell Manuela to pull over. I'm not kidding, there's something on your roof. There's something on your freaking roof. Fear to me is a sinking feeling. It's sort of like there's a heavy liquid rushing down through my body and pooling in the pit of my stomach. That's what I felt when I heard what Ruben had said to me that early morning. Pulling away from the phone, I told Manuela to stop. Fortunately, she took me seriously, probably alarmed by the frightened look on my face. What's going on? She asked as she quickly parked up by the side of the road. Ruben said there's someone on the roof. I replied breathlessly. What? Holy crap, Jessie muttered, glancing between us incredulously. He can't be for real, he's gotta be messing with us. He said he's not. I stammered, picking up the phone again. The call was still going and I asked Ruben if he was still there. Hold up, I'm coming, he told me, and I could hear frantic, stomping footsteps in the background. Almost there, give me a second. Don't get out, stay in the car, okay? The three of us waited with bated breath, none of us saying a word. Finally, Ruben spoke up again. Oh, crap. He sounded angry this time. I'm here, don't be mad at me, but there's nothing there anymore. Jessie, having leaned in to listen, growled and snatched the phone out of my shaking fingers. What the heck, man? You freaked me out. Do that again and I'll... He was interrupted by Ruben opening the door on the side of the car, sticking in a head of unruly brown hair. Look, I wasn't messing with you. There was really someone on your roof. I sighed, took back my cell phone, and I ended the call. Don't ever do that again, please. I wasn't joking. I saw something, I swear. You were just driving by, you knocked and waved at me, and then I looked up and there was this really small guy. I didn't see much of him, just a dark figure on top of the car. It looked creepy as heck too. He was kind of cowering up there, clinging to the roof. I don't even know how he even managed to stay up there. A visible shudder ran through his body as he straightened up, rolling his shoulders. "You three are all okay, right?" "Oh yes, I think I just suffered a minor heart attack," Manuela said, a low grumble rolling along with her voice. She had only just gone back to breathing regularly again. This sudden interruption had really left its mark on her. I was sour too, but more than anything, I was glad Ruben had been mistaken. And that's when I remembered something. "I heard something hit the roof earlier," I remarked. "Yeah, but you're the only one who did, so it couldn't have been loud enough to be a person climbing up there. How would that have worked anyways? Come on, you two, it's nothing." Jesse's tone was confident and soothing. Turning to Ruben, he added, "Is it possible at all that you didn't sleep too much?" Ruben pulled a face. "Last night, not for very long, I guess." "Yeah, I see where this is going. I suppose it could have been that. Should probably let Bill drive for a little bit." With a weary sigh, he apologized, rubbing his forehead as he removed himself from our car and began trudging back to his truck. We continued our drive on a mostly empty road. Bill had passed us in Ruben's truck, and eventually we had fallen behind to form the end of the caravan. The sun had already started to rise earlier, but the sky was still a dusky kind of dark. I had rested my head against the window pane, gazing out with hooded eyes, only half awake. It was this peaceful state that I was abruptly torn out of when Manuela let out a blood-curdling scream. I jolted upright, hitting my head on the window as the car took a sudden swerve, hurling me back into position. Jesse yelled something incoherent as he instinctively grabbed onto the back of the seat in front of him to keep him from being tossed about in the same manner as me. For an agonizing second or two, everything around us seemed to spin at an alarming speed until we finally came to a halt. I could hear Manuela panting. Slowly, the world came back into focus, and I hurriedly put on my thankfully undamaged glasses for a quick assessment. We were all in one piece, which was good. There was no blood to be seen, even better, and we had apparently not hit anybody on our detour. I slumped back into my seat in relief. "What the heck was that?" Jesse uttered, his voice a fusion of an agitated growl and a breathy sigh of relaxation. He was obviously expecting an answer from Manuela, but all she did was lift a shaking finger to point at the spot of road right in front of us. Jesse and I leaned over to look at the same time. Upon laying eyes on the cause of our driver's distress, we both recoiled slightly. I would have screamed, maybe, but the sudden stop just a few moments ago had already taken all the air out of me, numbing me to what I was now looking at. There in the middle of the road lay the curled-up body of a man. I climbed out of the car without even realizing it. Step by step, I approached the body, Jesse's and Manuela's shouts at me to come back not wholly registering in my mind. I heard them, but I didn't listen. It was like there was no one around but myself and that man on the ground. There was not a scrap of clothing on him, and he was facing away from me so I couldn't see his face, but his long stringy gray hair was spilled everywhere around his head. He was thin and frail, his skin wrinkled and saggy. A pool of blood had gathered around him, though the wound it stemmed from wasn't visible to me. Finally, whatever urge that had compelled me to walk up to his body yielded to my returning sense, and I stopped in my tracks before turning around and rushing back into the car, slamming the door behind me. I buried my face in my hands. I think I murmured something like, "Oh God," to myself over and over again. And I didn't stop until I felt Jesse's tentative hand rubbing my shoulder. "We need to call the police," he said softly. I nodded and we all started fumbling for our separate phones. I was trembling all over. Manuela announced that she would make the call, and just as she was about to dial the number, Jesse gasped. "Look," he told us, repeating himself a few times as he pointed at the body, or rather the empty spot that it had occupied mere moments ago. "What the?" Manuela whispered. "How?" No, this is impossible." I heard myself mumble as I got out of the car once more, this time followed by the others. "There was blood. Where's the blood? Where's the body?" I shook my head, unable to believe what I was seeing. There was no way that it just happened. There was no way that man, even if he had on some off chance still been alive, could have simply up and vanished without a trace. "We all saw this, right?" Jesse asked. Nobody replied. "Okay," Manuela eventually spoke up, trying to put firmness into her shaking voice. "We'll catch up with the others and tell them what happened, and then we'll sleep. I need sleep right now. I need to. I've got to sleep." The first stop of our journey was on a pull-in near a large gas station with a store and a place where you could pick up food and coffee. There weren't too many other cars parked there apart from our caravan, and the others were already there when we had arrived. The sun was high up in a bright blue sky at that point. Manuela had been driving with the windows down to let in the fresh and noon air. While we were still disturbed from what had happened, we had all considerably calmed down. We parked next to Bill and Ruben. The latter was lying sprawled out on the patch of grass beside the lot, surrounded by several burger wrappers and drain cups and bottles. In a way, he reminded me of the bloated corpse from earlier. Upon exiting the car, I took a moment to yawn and stretch before walking over to him to say hi. He turned his head lazily to the side to look up at me, flashing a weak smile. "Hello, you. You okay?" I asked. "I ate my anxiety and now I'm too full to move." He rolled over, letting out a groan. "It helped though. I'm good, really. My stomach just hurts a little. The human body wasn't made to consume this much fast food." "I'll make you something better once I get within arm's reach of the stove again. Hey, listen, about what happened earlier." "Yeah, I was an idiot. I don't know what got into me. I've gotten some sleep now, though," he replied, awkwardly turning to look up at the sky. "Sorry I freaked you guys out." "No, that's fine, after you left, something happened. This is gonna sound crazy, but we saw a body on the road." Ruben quickly sat up. "A body?" "Yes, it was there one moment and then it was just gone. It was this old guy. He was completely naked, lying in this huge pool of blood. I didn't see him from the front, but he was definitely dead. He didn't move at all. Anyways, we were about to call the police, but then we looked at the road again and he had disappeared. The blood wasn't there anymore either. It was like it all hadn't happened in the first place." "What? Is that a joke?" "No, I swear, I'm serious. Ask Jesse and Manuela. We all saw the same thing." I pointed over at my two travel companions, both of which were talking to Rob. Ruben's gaze fluttered from me to them and then back to me. Biting his lip, he reached up to wipe his forehead. "Well, that is something," he finally murmured. "Kinda makes you think about that guy on the roof. I mean, if afterwards you three started seeing weird stuff too. Okay, it's not like this can't be explained." I offered him my hand to help him stand up. "How do you mean?" "Not sure." He bent down to collect the trash that he had scattered across the ground. "It started with me spotting that one thing, probably made it up, and then I told you guys and you guys got freaked out. We're all stressed out here and we're all nervous. So after that first one, maybe the three of you just happened to be in the same state of mind and had like a group hallucination. That's gotta be a thing, right?" "It could be, I'm not gonna lie. I have no idea, but..." I paused to let out a nervous laugh. "Honestly, after that old guy's corpse, I'm just about ready to take anything that's faintly logical and run with it." Ruben nodded. I knew that he understood, and I appreciated the solution that he had offered me. I helped him throw away the wrappers before we returned to the group together. By then, Manuela and Jesse had already informed a lot of them about the unsettling incident, and they were now excitedly talking about it. Their reactions were mixed. Bill had a look on his face that made it clear he didn't believe a word of what we had said. Myrna seemed skeptical too, but had firmly attached herself to Rob's arm, and Rose simply appeared to be puzzled. Lottie, on the other hand, looked concerningly pale, and her husband was visibly uncomfortable as well. He kept on shifting his weight from one leg to the other, while fumbling with the bottom of his sleeves. Eventually, Rob raised his voice, causing everyone to fall silent. "Alright, listen up. Whatever happened back there on the road, obviously none of us can make sense of it. So let's hold off on the discussions for a while. We'll take our break and get some rest here and then proceed as planned. But first, is everybody okay with this? Manuela, if you don't feel like driving anymore, we can switch it up a little, there's no big deal." She shook her head. "Thanks, but I told you, I'm fine." "If you're sure, that's good. Now, I don't want anyone here to have a bad time, so if there's anything the three of you need, let me know." After that, the group dispersed, the bunch of us walking off into different directions to either find a good place to sleep or to simply move our legs. Having just talked to Ruben, I asked if I could keep him company, so we went on a walk together. I had stowed my glasses away somewhere in Manuela's car, which was how I ended up tripping over one of the benches on the grass beside the parking lot. But other than that, the break was uneventful. Ruben ended up having to steer me away from a few trash cans and lampposts, but he wasn't a jerk about it and we had a good laugh. I actually admitted to him that my nearsightedness was one of the reasons that I wanted out of the city. "So, let me get this straight. You want to leave for the country because you hate wearing your glasses?" he asked, stifling a chuckle. "It's more of a problem than it sounds," I insisted. "I didn't have glasses as a kid, and for a long time I didn't even know the world isn't, supposed to be kind of blurry. But when I was in my teens, it got a lot worse, and it was only then that I got my glasses. Maybe if I had had them earlier, I would have gotten used to them, but I never really did." "And you don't like contacts either?" "And they're just as bad. Does that make any sense?" "Absolutely. I mean, I've never heard anything like that before, so I guess it's a little unusual, but I get it." "Well, it's not the only reason I want to leave, though. I've had this whole kind of personal crisis. I was laid off at my restaurant, and the rest is sort of private, but I fell into a bit of a pit," I explained. Ruben nodded eagerly. "Yeah, same. I lost my job too. But that was the entirety of my pit, to be honest. It meant so much to me. One of the horses there, it wasn't mine, but it was my favorite. She was the sweetest animal that I've ever met. She died though, and just a few weeks later, they let me go." "I'm so sorry." "Yeah, I wasn't doing well until Frank told me about his dad's plan. It's kind of wild, but I've really been looking forward to all this." Suddenly he perked up. "Hey, you want to ride with me on the next stretch? I've had enough of Bill for a while." I figured that I could use a bit of a change, so I agreed and went to grab my bags from Manuela's car. When everybody got ready to go again, Manuela pulled me aside. "Keep your eyes open, alright? I'm not saying that anything else is gonna happen, but after that creepy old guy." I told her that I would take care, and with that, Ruben and I climbed into his truck. It was old but very nice. The seats might have been even leather, but it was hard to tell as they were heavily worn. I didn't mind it though. If anything, it made them more comfortable. "Make yourself at home," Ruben invited me. "Sorry if it's a little dirty. If it smells like smoke, it's a bit of Bill's fault." I told him to take it outside, but he wouldn't. Said the truck was just a hunk of trash anyways and that his cigarettes weren't going to ruin it. "Is that why you didn't want to keep driving with him?" "It's for his own safety, really." I opened the glove compartment to put away my glasses where I found half a bag of chips, which for some reason got me wheezing with laughter. Ruben then asked me to hand it to him, as he was apparently hungry again, and that only set me off further. So at least we departed on a way more lighthearted note than the 1-hour talk earlier had left us on. We drove with the windows down, and it must have been around 6 in the afternoon. So while it had been hot earlier, the air had cooled down considerably, which couldn't help but express relief at. "You don't like the heat?" "Well, it's not like I can't stand it, but it's uncomfortable. Do you?" "I like it. This may sound weird, but I think it feels good to sweat." "That's the first time I've ever heard that," I told him. "I'll bet. Mind you, I've worked in places where the sun's scorching like all day. Wouldn't have done that though if I didn't enjoy it at least a little bit. It's one of those things that you get used to if you do it long enough," he explained. I was just about to respond when all of a sudden there was a loud, odd noise coming from somewhere outside. It was deep and sort of warped, a growl rolling along with it like a raspy undercurrent. Both Reuben and I jolted upright, quickly shooting each other an unsettled glance. "What was that?" I whispered. "I don't know. I've heard some deer yell like that," he replied, though he didn't sound too convinced. With a snort, I gestured at our surroundings. We were on a more remote road now, and there was nothing on either side of us except wide stretches of short grass. If it's a deer, it's really well hidden. I tried to sound breezy, but my nervousness seeped through. "I gotta focus on the road here, but maybe you'll see it if you put your glasses on," Reuben answered lightly. I huffed and shook my head as I sank back into my seat. If you had seen the old naked guy too, you would get why I'm worried. My driver sighed deeply. "For real, I am worried. That whole thing earlier really freaked me out, but I just don't show stuff like that. Besides, I gotta keep you in good spirits, don't I? Rob wants us all to arrive happy and healthy after all." He paused. "I'm taking this serious. I do." Alright. Relaxing, I uncrossed my arms, and it was in that very same moment that the scream rang out again. This time even louder and much, much closer. Reuben and I both started, and he caught himself just in time to keep the car from taking a swerve. He cursed loudly, smacking the steering wheel with his palm. "Man, that was close. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think so," I answered breathlessly. "I'm sorry, It's fine," I assured him, clearing my throat in an attempt to regain my voice. "Nothing happened. Let's keep driving. We should probably get away from here." "Sure," he muttered, stepping on the gas. I was about to ask what he thought had caused the noise when the relative silence was broken by my cell phone ringing. I hastily dug it out of the glove compartment. It was Lottie calling. Taking a deep breath to try and collect my thoughts, I put her on speaker.
"Kitty?"
My cousin sounded unnerved.
"Speaking. What happened? Are you two alright?" "We are, it's all good. We just gotta start." "So you heard it too, I'm guessing." "Heard what?"
I exchanged a puzzled glance with Reuben.
"There was this loud roaring sound just now, kind of like a deer, and it really freaked us out." "No, there's nothing like that over here, and we're right behind you, by the way. So you didn't notice that other thing." "What other thing?"
She stayed silent for a few seconds before answering.
There was something on the bed of your truck. We saw that you were driving all wonky like for a second, and then something jumped off your truck bed."
I froze, looking over at Reuben. I saw him gnaw on his lower lip, just as speechless as myself.
"Kitty?"
Charlotte asked again, tearing me out of my trance.
"Yeah, still here."
I breathed.
"What was it? What did it look like?" "Well, that's hard to say. I'm not even sure if it was an animal or not. It moved kind of like a monkey or something. We didn't even notice it at first. It was sitting really still. And then it sort of reared its head and jumped off." "Where did it go?" "I'm not sure. It just ran off to the side and we lost sight of it." "Oh, God,"
I muttered to myself.
"Hey, Frank, can you hear me?"
Reuben asked from the side.
"Yeah."
My cousin's husband piped up through my phone. Reuben awkwardly cleared his throat.
You know that story that you told us? You did just make that up, right? There's not actually anything wrong with the trees there in our spot, is there?" "Nothing's wrong with them. Look, man, I don't know what this is either, and honestly, I regret telling you guys all that. I just wanted to creep you out, make this whole thing more interesting. It worked out nicely for sure."
Frank explained dryly. He sounded exhausted.
"Now please don't go running with that now, okay? Something strange, yes, but that story of mine, I meant it as a joke, I really did. It doesn't make sense."
Lottie chimed in.
"Are we just all seeing things?" "Let's concentrate on getting the heck out of here for now."
Reuben said steadfastly. He had audibly composed himself, and I gave him a smile.
"Yeah, that's probably for the best."
I added. Charlotte sighed.
"Okay, you two, take care. We'll see you at the next stop."
and with that, she hung up. I let go of a long breath. I couldn't stand the silence that had ensued between Reuben and me. His fingers were tapping in the steering wheel, creating a soft, drumming noise. This time, it was clear to see that he was just as worried as me. I had to say something. I had to distract the both of us. I'm really looking forward to the mountains. Yeah, me too. Lottie showed me a lot of the pictures and it looks so nice, but I wonder how it'll be when we're really there. I bet the air will be nice and fresh. It doesn't get too hot usually. That horse you like so much, what was her name? Bluebell. Are we gonna have horses in the mountains too? Rob says we probably will. It'll take some time though until we'll be able to get them, just like with Rose's sheep. You know, if all goes well, you might actually have one to yourself this time. Yeah, I'd like that. Horses are great animals, I love all of them. Of course, there'll never be another Bluebell, but still. Do you know how to ride? No, not really. Oh, it's not that hard. I could teach you sometime, maybe. Yeah, that'd be nice. When neither of us could think of anything to say anymore, Reuben turned on the radio. There was a slow country song playing which matched our mood nicely. Having just calmed down from this upsetting incident, it was like everything that had happened up to that point came flooding back into my head. Not only what I had seen when I was with Manuela, but everything that had led me up to where I was at right then. I couldn't help thinking about Nico. I had missed him terribly ever since we had broken up. Ever since we had departed, I hadn't thought of him as much, or at least not every second like I had before. We hadn't talked since I had moved out, and I found myself trying desperately to remember his voice. I must have been sitting there like this for hours. I know that look. I started upon hearing Reuben speak. Raising a brow, I turned to face him. I couldn't see him right, but he was looking at the road anyway. Where from? Mirrors, if you're missing someone, I know what that's like. Do you want to talk about it? I don't even want to think about it, but please don't take this the wrong way. I'd be glad to talk it over sometime. It's just too new. It's been over for a while now, but I take longer with these things. I get that. So, your missing person, was that one of the reasons you wanted out too? Well, I guess, but it's an old one. Hey, would you mind if we stopped for a moment? I really feel like stretching. I said sure, and we pulled over to the side of the road. We were still out in the open with no trees or anything else to either side. The sky was particularly dark and clear, and when I put on my glasses, I could see just how many stars were up there. We didn't have a lot of time, but for what it was worth, it was a lovely sight. Reuben got out of the car before I did. He groaned loudly, and I was pretty sure I could even hear his back crack as he straightened up. He rounded the truck and then stopped in his tracks. Something wrong? I asked, opening the side door to stick my head out, only to recoil when he pressed it shut again. Don't come out, he bellowed. The volume of his voice and the sudden rise in its pitch was startled me. Stay right there. Why? I leaned over to stick my head out the window instead. This time, Reuben placed his palm right up against my forehead and gently but firmly pushed me back in. Stay there, you don't want to see this, he uttered with a tremor. Please. He finally removed his hand and stepped up to the back of the truck. He let out a sharp gasp. God, no, he whimpered. No, no, no. I couldn't stay any longer. Against my better judgment, I staggered out of the car to stand beside him. Before I even spotted what he was looking at, I was already hit by a rotten stench. And then I saw it. It was right there on top of the truck bed, standing out even in the darkness. The large, severed head of a white horse. Its eyes were wide open, and they were staring up at us, looking strangely spirited despite their obvious lifelessness. I felt bile rise in my throat, and before I could push myself together, I doubled over and threw up on the grass. I had to pull myself up on the truck door when I was done. Meanwhile, Reuben stood absolutely motionless like a statue. When I found it in me to look him over properly, I saw a horrified sort of recognition flickering in his eyes. That's her, he stammered. It can't be her. Of course not, but it looks exactly like her. He swallowed audibly. His eyes were rimmed with tears which slowly began to roll down his cheeks. This isn't happening. Tell me this isn't happening. I took a deep breath, the taste of my sick still flashed on my tongue. Okay, come on, sit down, I whispered, placing my hand on his shoulder to gently turn him around and lead him to the passenger seat. He plopped down with a whine. You're okay, it'll be okay. I tried to assure him as I leaned over the side to grab my phone from the glove box. What are you doing? He asked weakly. I need to take a picture of this. Last time, I'm not sure the others believed us. Bill definitely didn't, and I'm not sure about Rob and Myrna either. I explained as I opened the camera with shaking fingers. I hastily went back around for the photo, only to find that the horse's head had disappeared, seemingly into thin air. My shoulders dropped. You have got to be kidding me, I remember thinking. It's gone, I confessed, turning back to Ruben. How can it be gone? He replied, but he didn't get up. I don't know. I swung myself into the driver's seat. I'll drive for a while. I'm so sorry. Please try to rest if you can. We didn't take off for another while, though. I simply sat and thought, hoping for my stomach to settle. Frank and Lottie had passed us, but seeing as there was nothing off about us being parked there to take an apparent break, they didn't slow down. Finally, Ruben seemed to recover a bit. I don't understand, he mumbled. I was really trying to explain this all the way, but there's obviously no way that's going to work anymore. And now this, and now this. He shook his head like he was trying to chase the image from his mind. I'm sorry I lost my cool there. I'm going to keep it together from now on, I promise. This was simply too much just now. Do you still want to drive? I think it's better that way, I confirmed. You're right. He pulled his legs up inside the truck. Keep on your glasses, though. Sure. The truck sprang to life with a sputter. Apart from being a little slow, I'm an alright driver, so I got us on the road at a throttled tempo. After about half an hour, Ruben said something like, well, how's this for a hayride? And that's how I knew that he was back to his old self at least. So, do you have any ideas on what any of this means? I inquired tentatively. I really don't know. If I had to guess, and I'm not gonna lie, this is based on Frank's story, even though he says it isn't true. Something doesn't want us to reach the mountains. Yes, but why would Frank's made-up legend have anything to do with this? I mean, it doesn't add up. Nothing adds up here, Ruben reminded me. I don't even know anymore. The thing is, how would anyone or anything know about Bluebell? It's like it can read minds or something. It, I repeated, drawing the word out. I still can't believe there's actually something like this happening to us. If you had asked me before, I would tell you that there's no such thing as, well, as any of this. It's insane. It is. The others are gonna freak out, but at this point, I'm pretty sure they simply ought to hear us out. Well, what do you think we do? Nothing. I have my theories, yes, but in the end, we don't know what's going on, and even so, we shouldn't be changing our plans. I mean, these things we keep seeing aren't real anyways. I'm not gonna lie. That just now, that was terrifying. I'm not gonna forget this for a long time, I think. But still, it went away, so as long as these things stay fake, what's imaginary can't hurt me, right? I guess not, I replied, slightly reassured by the improving faith in his voice. So, you still want to get to the mountains? He snorted. After all this, I want to get to the mountains more than ever. Do you? Yeah, so do I. Turning back is out of the question anyways, because where would that get us? Just because this started while we were on the road doesn't mean it'll stop if we don't go. It might not even have anything to do with our land at all. Like you said, we don't know. Right, but come on, it has to be about the land. I know Frank made up a story, but it could have come alive or something. Sounds silly, but I'm ready to believe anything right about now. But if it did, that wouldn't change our plans. Well, of course not. I'm sure the others would want to pull through anyways. We're gonna have to tell them what happened soon. Suppose we'll find out how that'll go. but we're gonna get there and we're gonna have a fresh start. All of us. We all want this so much. He took a bottle out of the center console, unscrewed it, and took a deep, long swig before letting out a sigh. Everything sucks now, but we'll sort this out, I'm sure. I gave him a thankful nod. He definitely knew what I had been wanting to hear, and it felt good to know that even after what we had seen, he was ready to carry on with our journey. If he was, the others would probably be too. Either way, Jesse had been right. Ruben definitely did have thick skin. I thought about calling Lottie or someone else from the rest of the caravan to tell them what we had seen, but decided to save it for later. It'd be better for when they weren't in their cars. So we drove on for a while. Ruben fell asleep in the passenger seat, but after a few more hours he woke up and took the wheel so I could get some rest in turn. By the time that we pulled up to our second stop, Ruben had woke me up. I was actually feeling pretty refreshed. Nothing like being petrified and alone on some country road to distract you from your life having gone to crap. The second place that Rob had chosen for us to take a break from our journey was a large truck stop. We were the last members of the caravan to reach it, and the others had already been waiting for us. "Thanks for the ride," I told Ruben as I opened the door and climbed outside. "Well, my pleasure." Even before I spotted the nervous looks on everybody's faces, I sensed the tension in the air. Something simply felt wrong, and Ruben must have noticed it too as he growled quiet, "What now?" under his breath. Lottie was the first one to truly take note of our arrival. She spun around and came rushing towards me, taking my hands in hers, her features derailed with worry. "Oh, thank God you made it. How are you? Is everything all right?" "Not really," I admitted. "Wait, what's happened with you guys?" "It's Bill. He was riding with Manuela and Jesse, and when there was this wooded stretch of the land, they stopped because Jesse had to take a leak. Well, while they were doing that, they figured they might as well get out and stretch their legs. So Manuela and Bill got out too and they all went for a walk. Apparently they had had an argument in the car, so they needed to take some time to cool off, and they went off in different directions, and then, you better get the rest from Manuela." She quickly squeezed my hands again before letting go and running off somewhere. I shook my head inside as I went about looking for my two other travel buddies. Jesse was sitting in the parking lot sidewalk, looking absolutely defeated. Manuela was standing next to him. She had taken off her shoes and was walking to and fro barefoot, her lip twitching as though she was talking to herself in her head. She kept shaking her head like she was saying, "No," over and over again. Upon seeing me approach, she looked up with a weak smile. "Hello," she greeted me, her voice breaking a little. "I see you've made it through your ride with Ruben." "Yeah, he's nice," I replied. "We were okay except for, never mind, I'll tell you later. What happened to Bill? Where is he?" "Oh, Rob took him to get something to eat somewhere quieter. He's not well. After what we saw in the woods, we aren't either, but he's been feeling terrible. We kind of fought for a while in the car back there, but I hope he'll be okay." "So what happened?" Manuela motioned me over as she lowered herself down to sit next to Jesse. I crouched down beside her. We had stopped by the woods and all got out to move around a little. It had been sort of steamy with the three of us, and Jesse had to relieve himself, so he went off on his own, and so did I. And Bill just marched right into those trees. I was walking alongside the road, and then I suddenly heard one of the guys scream out. I couldn't tell who it was at first, but then I heard Jesse shout Bill's name, and all I could do was try to follow their voices as best I could. It was so dark and I could hardly see anything, but then I bumped into someone. I was so startled that I tripped and fell onto my back, and then I finally saw who I had ran into. It wasn't Jesse or Bill. It was this woman, this girl, but she didn't look right. Manuela paused to take a deep breath and rub her temples. For a couple seconds, she was merely fumbling for words before finally finding the composure to speak up. She must have been around 18, and for the most part she was normal, except her neck was incredibly long and thin. I don't know how she could even hold her head upright. She was making these horrifying choking sounds, and it was awful. I tried to crawl away from her, even though she didn't actually move towards me, and then all of a sudden, Jesse picked me up from behind. He and Bill had actually been standing right there the whole time. They had seen the girl too, and that's why Bill had started screaming. He wasn't moving actually, he just stood and stared. We tried to get him away from there again. The girl wasn't coming at us, but we were all panicking. We had to grab both his arms and drag him back to the car by force. We stuffed him in there and drove away as fast as we could, and Jesse did his best to calm him down. He was nearly hyperventilating. But then he recovered and calmed down again, at least a little bit. And then he told us about the girl. He freaked out because he sort of used to know her. Well, actually more than that. I'm sorry, I want to say this tactfully. There's not really a way. The girl looked like his daughter. Bill is a daughter? I repeated blankly. Well, he used to. She's not around anymore. Oh my god. Yeah, Manuela muttered, sounding silently choked up. Of course, Bill nearly lost his mind. Seeing her like this, she didn't even look human in her neck. It was like this twisted insinuation, like a reminder of how she'd... You see what I mean? That's awful, I'm so sorry, I muttered. How is he now? Well, disturbed, like I said. Sure, he believes us now about that dead guy that we saw yesterday, but honestly, considering his breakdown, I'd rather nothing had happened and he would still be saying that we're full of it. Manuela groaned softly. I don't understand. I can't believe any of this is actually happening. Ever since we left, it feels like I've been going crazy, like we all are. I know that we ran away from the girl, so we didn't see her disappear, but she obviously couldn't have been real. Wait, but you did bump into her, so that means she was physically there, right? Manuela's brow furrowed. Well, I didn't think about that, she said quietly. What do you think that means? I gave her a quick rundown of what had happened when I had been riding with Ruben. So he said that these hallucinations or whatever they are might just be frightening, but as long as they weren't really there and they couldn't really hurt us, we'd probably be okay. Well, if that's not true, we might actually be in some trouble here. It's not something that I like to think about, but we might need to be prepared for things to get, well, worse. How can it get worse, though? I don't know, life finds a way, it seems, I said. Manuela gave me a soft, strained laugh, and then she squeezed my shoulder. Let's go check up on the others. At that point, Rob had returned, but without Bill. Instead, Ruben was walking alongside him. They appeared to be talking excitedly, and I figured that he was telling them about what we had seen. Rob was nodding occasionally, his hand buried in his salt and pepper hair. There was a somber look on his face. When they had eventually reached us, he patted Ruben on the back before turning away from him to address the rest of the group. Oh, folks, I hear we've been running into trouble on the road again. It's undeniable at this point that we have some kind of problem on our hands, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I've never heard of anything like this, let alone experienced it. This isn't a normal situation that we're in, and I want you guys to be alright. This isn't exactly a risk that I considered when I was making my plans for this journey. Now I know this has been difficult, so I hope none of you have changed your minds about our destination. But if anybody wants to turn back, I totally understand, and I'll pay for whatever tickets you might need if you didn't come with a car. It's not your fault, Dad, Frank said quietly from beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder which he gently brushed off. I need you all to be okay, Rob told us. I don't know what's going on, but as soon as we reach the mountains and set up a place to camp, we can figure it out, I'm sure. So, are you guys still on board? All of us either nodded or muttered words of agreement. Rob gave us a relieved smile. Well, I'm very glad to hear that, people. Bill is still willing to carry on as well, so we're all staying together. Let's all relax here for a while now, get a grip again, and then we'll head out when it gets dark. Our group dispersed, and I went off to lie down on one of the benches outside. It would have been most likely been comfortable to sleep in one of our cars, but it was way too hot to go back inside. After a couple of hours, Lottie woke me up to tell me that we were all taking a shower. At the truck stop, you could get a free shower if you bought a certain amount of fuel. Rob could have easily paid for showers, but he wanted to make us use the stop's generous offer on behalf of all of us. And it didn't surprise me. You probably have to be at least a bit opportunistic like that to get yourself rich. So what we did was fill up all the cars with the same pump, while keeping it running so it would all be on one transaction. And then we had Jesse go to the fuel desk to pay and ask for a shower with extra towels. The showers were in single stalls that locked, and we went in one right after the other, with the couples going in together, without closing the door of our stall. It was sort of shady and it didn't feel completely right, but I couldn't deny that it was a little fun, and it took our minds off of everything. At least the caravan came out smelling a lot fresher. My mind felt absolutely empty afterwards. We sat down out in the open to dry up, which in the blazing heat didn't take very long. I felt weakened and relaxed at the same time. You know that when you're so done with everything that it feels like your brain is gone sort of mushy. Well, that's the mood that I was in. After a while, Bill came back to us as well. He looked like he had been dragged through it and back. Look at him, and I thought the ride had worn me out. Reuben, who was sitting on the ground beside me, whispered in my ear. I nodded. I really felt awful for the guy, and seeing as even Reuben did so after all their fighting, it was safe to say this sentiment was shared by the entirety of the group. After Bill had settled in amongst us, we quieted down. No one was sure what to say, so we all collectively decided not to say anything at all. We stayed like that until it was time to leave again. Lottie waved me over. She had already loaded my bags into her car and motioned for me to get in. She seemed really concerned for me. She had always been that way, caring to a fault. We were both only children, so we had treated each other like sisters ever since we could remember. You really don't want to drive alone with Frank? I asked. Last time we went out together, you two got way flirty. Not sure if I want to see that right now. Hey, you could always take your glasses off, she joked, only to visibly regret it in an instant. I will behave. Please, I just want you around. I'd be way too worried after everything that's happened. I need to know that you're alright. Fine, I muttered, climbing onto the back seat and curling up there. Lottie's and Frank's car was really nice, with seats comfortable enough to pass as mattresses. All I wanted was to take another nap, so that's what I did. I spent the following hours half asleep, breaking out of my haze every now and then to text Jesse. After having gotten Manuela's version of the incident with the girl with the long neck, I had asked for his as well, and despite the two of them being identical, it was good to get the bigger picture. Lottie, Frank, and I didn't talk a lot on the way. We both tried to start up a conversation occasionally, but it never got anywhere. I simply didn't feel like it. I love my cousin, and her husband is a decent guy too, but after what happened with Nico, it kind of hurt to see them together and what they had had in each other. I know that's a petty thing to say, but it's just how I felt at the time. You can't fight these things. Therefore, we drove in relative silence until I suddenly felt a certain urge. Are we anywhere near a gas station by any chance? I'd asked them. Nope, sorry, Frank replied. You, gotta go. Yes, I replied meekly, crossing my legs. I can totally just do it on the side of the road, though. You mean right here? Lottie sounded concerned, gesturing at our surroundings. We were driving through woodland again with tall, dark trees to either side. The forest did look a bit intimidating now that she was pointing it out, but still, nature called, in this case in more ways than one. Frank pulled over and I climbed out of the car. Lottie stuck her head out of the window after me. Be careful then, come right back here afterwards. I'll be fine, I muttered, as I trudged off past the tree line, fumbling in my pocket for the handkerchief that I had brought. I walked just a little further until I had reached a spot where I was sure they couldn't see me from the car. I did what had to be done, and when I was finished, I got on my way again. The woods were quiet and still, and the distance between me and my companion suddenly felt much longer than before. That's when I heard an odd, high-pitched sound, kind of like a squeak or a tiny little cry. I turned to see where it had come from, and after looking around for a few seconds, I had spotted the source. At first glance, it appeared to be a rolled-up heap of cloth, which moved a couple of inches every now and then. It was only when I tentatively approached it that I realized that it was a baby. I stood glued to the spot for a split second. I didn't know what to do at first. What are you supposed to do when you find an infant in the middle of a forest? My head was swimming. For how long had this poor thing been lying there, all by itself on the bare ground? Gently shushing in order to keep from startling it, I bent down and carefully picked it up. It felt warm and heavy in my arms. Even in the darkness, I could see its round, bright blue eyes looking up at me. It let out a soft babble when I brushed some leaves and dirt off the blanket that it was wrapped up in with my finger. "Oh, hey you," I whispered. "You're okay, I got you. Shh." I tried to think straight. For one, I was utterly appalled by the idea of someone leaving a kid alone to die. But other than that, I found myself completely overwhelmed. I figured that I would have to take the little one to Lottie and Frank first. Maybe they would know what to do. We would probably have to call an ambulance. After all, there's no way of knowing how long it had been lying here. I started off into the direction of the car again at a brisk pace, muttering to the baby as I did. Weirdly enough, after around 2 minutes of walking, I still hadn't reached the others. Not even the road was anywhere in sight. Feeling a pang of fright, I considered the option of having gotten lost. I cursed inwardly. There really couldn't have been a worse time for that to happen, and I hadn't even brought my phone. "Lottie," I shouted out into the darkness. "Guys, where are you?" No response. I repeated myself a little louder this time, yet still careful not to yell directly at the infant. I kept walking, growing increasingly desperate as there was still no trace of my friends. Was this even possible? I hadn't gone that far into the forest. Had I? "Sit down." I stopped in my tracks upon hearing the voice. It sounded warped and distorted, kind of like someone talking on a radio with really bad reception. It was high in pitch, almost enough to make my ears ring. "Just sit down somewhere and wait for them to find you. Hold on to me, I'm all you'll ever have." I stared down at the little bundle in my arms. The thought in itself was bizarre, but it sounded like it was coming from the baby. I couldn't see anything anymore. The forest around me had gotten so dark that even with my glasses on, I was basically rendered half blind. "Stay here and hold me. I'm what you wanted, right? You'll never have anything like me again." Why not? I don't know why I asked that. My head was completely empty. I was way too confused and afraid to form a single sound thought. At that point, I should have known none of this was actually happening, but it felt so real. "Because you're never going to fall in love again, and nobody will ever feel close enough to you to start a family with you. Nobody. After how much of a wreck you become, who would have you anyways?" I don't quite know what happened then, but when I came to, I was lying curled up on the forest floor with Lottie's hand on my shoulder. She was saying my name over and over again, gently shaking me, She let out a small gasp when I returned her gaze. "Can you see me? Are you awake? Say something, please." "Where's the baby?" The question was out of my mouth before I even registered that my arms were empty. "What baby?" The baby. I found it here. It was all alone." "Oh, sweetie, there is no baby. Come on. Let's get you up. Here we go." She gently placed her arm behind my back, hoisting me into a sitting position before bringing me up to my feet. She guided me back to the car where she helped me sit down. "Have you got her?" Frank's voice rang out from behind us as he caught up to us. He had apparently been searching in the woods for me too. "Yeah, she's here." "Oh, thank God. Is she all right? What happened?" We stayed by the roadside for a few more minutes. Lottie was dabbing my forehead and cheeks with a wet piece of cloth, wiping the sweat and tears off my face. Eventually, my breathing had returned to normal, and after gulping down 2 bottles of cold water, the world was finally coming back into focus. I told my cousin what had happened, or at least the better part of it. I tried to fall back asleep until the caravan had arrived at its next stop. It wasn't actually planned, more like a little one in between. After my crisis, Lottie had called Rob and told him that we needed a timeout, so he decided that we would briefly get together at this pole-in next to a small gas station and talk things over. It was that time of night where the sky was at its absolute darkest when we got out of our cars. Fortunately, none of us were too tired, so our minds, except for mine, were still relatively sharp. Rob came over to check up on me first thing. He asked me how I was feeling and if there was anything he could do for me. I asked for some candy from the gas station shop, and surprisingly he took me quite seriously, as he marched right off and came back with various bags of gummy bears. "It's on me." "Thank you, you really didn't have to." "Yes, I do. I don't know how any of this is happening, and it's definitely not what I had planned, but I ought to get you guys through this." He let out a deep sigh. "At least you're communicating. Bill shut down completely for almost a day there. I don't want that to happen again." I had to hand it to him. He really seemed to care about us. After our conversation, I sat down by myself on the ground next to Ruben's truck, eating gummy bears and staring at the sky while the others were talking about our shared problem. I felt too drained to be a part of the discussion. Eventually, it was time to depart again, and Ruben came trudging up to me, scratching his beard as he gave me a sympathetic look. I lazily raised my head to meet his gaze, nodding at the truck behind me and making a questioning noise. Words would have been too much of an effort. He seemed to get it though. "Sure, get in there." He walked around to get in the driver's seat. No conversation needed because I like that. And with that, we were off. When the sun began to rise, I was starting to feel a lot better. We were driving mostly uphill now, and the woods had turned into plain and dried-out grasslands. We would reach the mountains soon. "So, when you guys were talking earlier, did you get anywhere?" "Yup, Rob came in with a plan, or rather safety measures. He wants to buy us some guns, and it's all based on what you said to Manuela earlier, that these hallucinations have a physical form. Time for shyness on our side is over. If it has a body, we can hurt it." We all agreed that it was getting extremely personal too, what with Bill's daughter and you being scared that you'll never have a family. Nice of Lottie to spread that around. You really care about that now. I mean, yes, it's kind of intimate, but we may need to give up on privacy if we want to figure this out. Besides, I told you about Bluebell. That's different. Why? Because it's only about a horse. No, mine's embarrassing. There's a difference between having lost something or someone important to you and being afraid that you'll never have anything like it at all. Plus, I've been feeling so sorry for myself since the breakup. I didn't even want to stay in the car with Frank and Lottie, just because I can't see happily married people right now. How pettily miserable is that? Ruben patted the steering wheel and thought. "All right, hear me out. So, I'm a divorcee. I got married to my high school sweetheart and she got pregnant. We were both really young, but I was looking forward to being a father. Turns out the kid wasn't mine. We split up and then the real father went and got engaged to her, and for all I know, they're still together raising that kid. At the time, I was crushed. I'd see them every now and then, and that hurt so bad. The thoughts that it gave me, too. It got to the point where I was so angry and bitter that I despised everybody who was in a better place than me. So I got myself out of there. I started working at a ranch far away, and for a while, it was just my work and me. It changed me. I didn't feel like anything was missing anymore. I started dating again, too. Sure, my plans for life had changed completely, but that didn't make me any less happy. I never thought that I would be fine on my own, but here I am, on my way to the mountains, and that one thing from my past that's really haunting me is a dead horse. What are you saying? You will have a family of your own someday, I'm sure. But even if you don't, you'll find some other thing that'll make you happy. And you're right on the brink of your own new start right now. You might not want to hear it, but I just want you to think about that, if it's any help at all. Actually, I think it is. I gave him a genuine smile. Thank you. And then all of a sudden I had an idea. It was sort of outlandish and I didn't know what to make of it at all, but it was something. Ruben, you know how us, Bill, Manuela, and Jesse are the only ones who really had those encounters? No. Frank and Lottie saw something on my truck bed just before we... Yes, exactly. Okay, think about this. Except for maybe the old naked man, these images were all connected to our past. Like something that we're more or less trying to get away from by doing this. Frank and Lottie, they're not really going to the mountains for a fresh start. They only want to go there for the sake of it. So when they saw that thing in your truck, maybe it was an illusion. He hummed, looking deeply focused. Keep talking. Oh, there's more. When we had started driving and I was with Manuela, she thought that she saw like this weird animal on the road for only a split second. And you saw something clinging to the roof of the SUV. So what you're saying is this thing, this little creature is what's doing this. But how? Frank's the one who loves supernatural stuff, but you ever read about shapeshifters? Having presented my theory to Ruben, he urged me to call Frank and Charlotte right away. Upon answering my call, Lottie slurred a tired "Hello" into her cell phone. But when she noted the agitation in my tone, she perked up considerably. Remember that thing you saw sitting on the truck bed? I asked eagerly. What did it look like again?
A bit like a person, but also not. It moved like some kind of monkey or ape with how it was crouched down here.
I glanced over at my driver. That sound about right? Well, it looked a little more like a person to me, but now that I think about it, yeah, I guess so. His voice was light with both disbelief and the excitement of realization. I quickly explained that we had figured it out, that it was this creature that we were looking for, and that we thought it must have been stalking us ever since we had left the city. Frank, anything you might know about that sort of thing? You're the folklore nerd. Ruben shouted into the phone from beside me.
Now, I don't know, it reminds me of a couple of things actually. You know what a will-o'-the-wisp is.
What? Ruben shouted again, right into my ear.
Okay, you ever heard of these spook lights? They're the Marfa lights.
They ring a bell, but I don't know.
Well, it's sort of like those. They're these tiny, unearthly lights that make themselves look like lamps or lanterns to misguide travelers. Normally, they're said to be caused by fairies or ghosts, so I'm not sure if that's really what we've got here. But the traveling part in the misleadings would fit. Of course, a shapeshifter is something else, but it might be comparable.
So, what we know so far is it's small and hunched, looks faintly like a person, and has somehow access to our most painful memories, I said.
I'm not really sure.
Frank replied.
I'll think about it. Maybe I'll come up with something. Rob should have something for us to defend ourselves with once we're at the next stop. We can talk then.
All right, take care. I ended the call with a sigh. This feels like it's going to be useful somehow. Might help us if we do have to shoot this out. Speaking of which, I paused and nervously cleared my throat. I've never ever held a gun before. I've got no idea how to handle one. I don't think it would come to that. You wouldn't want to give a firearm to the girl who never wears her glasses either. And just keep your eyes on the road. When we arrived at the next stop, the caravan had agreed upon, the sun had already passed its highest point in the sky and was about to start to set again. The truck slowly rolled up to the yellowish-green patch of grass the others had already gathered on, and we climbed outside. Upon noticing our arrival, Rob waved us over and we all formed somewhat of a crude circle around him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, sounding both tired and determined at the same time. "Let us cut to the chase. Who of you is confident in their skills with weapons?" Rose shrugged and raised her hand. Reuben mumbled a little, "I guess," and did the same, followed by Bill and Manuela. Rob nodded. "All right, very good. That's 5 of us if we count myself. Once we go back into groups, there should always be one person with a gun so they can have the others' backs. I've gotten us enough. They're not top-notch, but they'll do the trick. Frank, there is something that you wanted to tell us too." Right," his son spoke up, clearing his throat. "Kitty came up with this theory on what we're looking for, so I've been trying to figure out what exactly this thing is. I can't say that I know this for sure, but I did remember a pretty obscure legend that would match this one to a fault. Alright, so there's this dwarfish, a humanoid spirit that has the ability of taking on different shapes and forms. Just like ours, it can get into the minds of the people it focuses on, and it'll use what it sees to frighten them out of its settled territory. It's not a mind reader, but it can view certain memories, and this is where it gets interesting. Remember the ghost story that I made up for you guys? Of course, that was only me trying to be funny, but I might have been on the right track anyways. These creatures don't mark their haunts, but they do live in determinate spots and they're very defensive of them. Our land could really be the home of one of these things. I imagine that it spotted us at some point since Dad, Lottie, and I kept coming there to check out the place, and it must have attached itself to us, and it's probably been following us until it realized that we were getting ready to go there together, so then it decided to make its move. I've heard of this thing a couple of years ago and I forgot about it for a long time. A buddy of mine who's pretty crazy about folklore too told me. I don't think he had a name for it though. The problem is, the shapeshifter has already shown us some twisted stuff that's meant to make us uneasy, so it's probably only going to get worse from here. It'll try to keep us away from our land, and I'm sure it'll give it all that it's got. If we thought that the old naked guy was bad, we're not going to like what this thing might come up with once it grows desperate, and it most likely will once it realizes we're not going to stop. Frank ended his explanation with a somber nod. "So what's the plan exactly?" Bill asked. "Next time we see something creepy, we shoot at it?" Pretty much what I had in mind, yeah," Frank answered in a dry tone. "Maybe that won't work at first and maybe it won't kill it, but it's probably not going to like it either. We shoot to get it off our backs, and if we don't manage to get rid of it, we'll have to deal with it when we reach the mountains. We need to off it one way or another, and the sooner the better, before things get truly out of hand. Then again, we know that it doesn't like people, so it'll stay away from us when we're all together like this. On the road, that's not possible, of course, but it'll be a benefit for us if we need to confront it in the mountains. It's not going to grant us safe passage," Manuela said as she took the gun handed to her by Rob. "So basically, we keep driving and wait for it to attack again so we can defend ourselves." "Basically, yes. I know that it'll be nerve-wracking, but it's all that we can do." Manuela sighed resignedly. "This will be a long night, won't it? Kitty, are you coming along with us?" For the final part of the drive, I rode with Manuela and Jesse. Rob and Myrna stayed together and Rose joined Frank and Lottie, leaving Bill and Reuben as a reluctant team once again. I spent the remaining time washing my hair with shampoo and bottled water, which is not at all easy. At least it got dry in no time. The pull-in gave us the chance to freshen up and quickly buy some more supplies, mostly snacks, candy, water, and coffee, before we all got ready to depart once more, getting back into Manuela's SUV. I was feeling a little giddy. We were almost there, and yet this whole trip still felt like kind of a fever dream. "Where'd you learn to shoot?" I asked Manuela. "Oh, my mother taught me. She did it for sport, only at targets. I was pretty good at it too. It's been some time, but I think I can handle it just fine. Only it'll feel different actually shooting at something. Well, real." I allowed myself to smile. Her confidence was heartening. Jesse, however, remained visibly uncomfortable. "When we heard it, do you think it might try to do something to us too? I mean, it hasn't gotten violent yet, all things considered. I don't know if I want to see it go into a frenzy." Frank didn't say anything about that, did he? "I don't think it'll be able to do a lot of physical harm," I remarked. "If it could, it would simply do that instead of tormenting us mentally." "What if it just doesn't do that because it wants to get rid of us the peaceful way?" Manuela laughed bitterly. "This thing has been making a mockery of a man's dead daughter. Bill almost lost his mind when he saw it. If that's its idea of a peaceful way, I don't want to know what it thinks is outright war." "Why are you scared of hurting it?" I asked. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe we should really leave it alone. We're taking a huge risk here." "Perhaps, but this is our land now. It's my future and my new start. I'm not going to let some goblin between me and that." Manuela told him with a seriousness that left no room for doubt. "And neither should you. This is your shot at leaving the gross, smelly city, remember?" Jesse seemingly agreed, nodding as he drew himself up, nesting further into his seat. I looked over at him, mustering a reassuring smile, or at least what I was hoping to be one. "I'm creeped out too," I said quietly. "We'll see this through though, okay?" Jesse puffed out his chest a little, looking slightly more at ease. I thought of how he had been acting at the start of our trip. I missed that outgoing, spunky side of his. I never had an older brother, but with his teasing and joking around, Jesse had somehow made me feel what it might be like to have one. I hoped that he would return to his normal self soon. We drove on for hours and hours, but it didn't feel like much time was passing. Glancing over at Manuela, I watched her staring at the road ahead, a small serene smile playing on her lips. She had turned on the radio and was humming along with the music. Her gun was resting safely in the glove compartment. Suddenly, she perked up. "You guys, look up ahead." I scrambled to put on my glasses. Both Jesse and I leaned forward as far as we could to gaze outside through the windshield. When I saw what Manuela had been pointing out, I let out a tiny odd, "Oh." There right before us, the road moved up steeply to climb a very large hill, and in the distance behind it, enormous mountainous peaks sat silhouetted against the dark sky. "Is that it?" I asked. "Are we almost there?" "I think so, but they're still far away," Manuela replied. "They seem so close though," I muttered. "Because they're huge," Jesse replied, stifling a chuckle. "Yeah, that may be it." That was the last thing I said before taking my glasses off again and contentedly settling back down to fall asleep. I woke up to the sound of tires screeching. I was shaken and tossed about in my seat as the SUV came to a very sudden halt. Jesse was pressed up against me, shaking me by the shoulder. Letting out a whimper to signal my conscious state, I brushed off his hand and began to grope about for my glasses, regretting having laid them aside. "What's going on?" I murmured groggily, finally finding them and placing them atop my nose. "Ruben's gone." He had to say no more than that to send me into a momentary state of shock. "What?" I breathed. "He had to stop because Ruben needed to pee, but Bill turned away and the next thing that he knew, he had disappeared." I was suddenly extremely aware of a familiar heaviness pooling in the pit of my stomach. I stared at Jesse, mouth agape, listening as he explained. "Bill called Rob first, right after it had happened, and then the rest of us. We all came back to where he had vanished as fast as we could, and we're here now. This is where they had stopped. I'm sorry, I should have really woken you up right away." He ran both hands through his hair, wiping the sweat off his forehead in the same motion. "Come on, we need to get out." He didn't have to tell me twice. I hastily climbed out of the car, finding myself on a wide meadow with the edge of a forest nearby. The other members of the caravan had parked crisscross all over the grass, and they were staggering towards each other with worried looks on their faces. Jesse and I rushed to join them, Manuela right behind us. There wasn't much to be said, and even Rob kept things brief when he shouted his commands out to the lot of us. "There's no time to lose. We look for him in those woods. It's hardly been 10 minutes since he's been gone. He can't be that far. Bill, take Jesse along with you. The rest, stay in your groups." Lottie and I very curtly exchanged unnerved glances before we all scattered, heading for different parts of the woods. The bright morning sun made it easy for us to look around as we repeatedly shouted for Reuben. I yelled so loudly that my throat was already beginning to feel sore after only a couple minutes. Manuela and I made way deeper and deeper into the forest, growing increasingly desperate and disturbed with every moment that passed without us finding him. And then all of a sudden, there came a response from somewhere between the trees. "Guys?" Manuela and I both spun around to find Reuben step out from the thicket, brushing some dirt off of his pants. I let go of a deep, sharp breath. "Where were you? Are you okay?" "I had to go number 2, okay? Sorry I didn't speak up when I heard you guys shouting. I had no idea that you were looking for me. I didn't exactly want you around for it." He gave us an awkward grin. "I know we're all on edge right now, but I figured a fella could slip away for 15 minutes without everybody going into a panic." I stifled an angry growl. "Dude, what the heck did you expect? We thought that thing dragged you off somewhere." "Alright, I'm really sorry." He soothingly raised his hands. "Thanks though for worrying. I just didn't think about it. It won't happen again." Manuela shook her head in suppressed fury. "It better not, sir. Come on, let's go back. Rob isn't going to be happy, you know. What are you doing acting like a little kid? Well, we ought to put you on a leash now." She let out an exasperated sigh, brushing a stray strand of dark hair out of her face as she turned on her heel. Just as Reuben was about to follow her, I found myself reaching out to grab him by the wrist. I barely registered doing it until he turned to me with a questioning look on his face. "Kitty?" he asked. I didn't respond. I just held his gaze. "Is something wrong?" He tried again. "You know better than this," I said. "I know I really do again. I'm sorry." "No," I interrupted him. "You literally know better than this. Why wouldn't you just tell Bill before running off into the forest?" He cleared his throat, tilting his head. "Yeah, I should have." I tightened my grip on his lower arm. "Manuela," I called out nervously. "Yes?" she replied in a low voice. I was unable to break Reuben's gaze, but I heard a small clicking noise, unmistakably coming from her gun. "What the heck are you doing?" Reuben hissed. "I hope I'm right with this, because if not, it'll be very embarrassing later. But I really don't think that you're him," I replied. "So where is he?" Reuben opened and shut his mouth, shaking his head nervously. "Girls, I don't know what to tell you. I'm really not." "Found him." All three of us whirled around into the direction the cry had come from. Lottie and Frank were approaching us from our right, the latter supporting a half-conscious Reuben, sporting what would probably turn out to be a glorious shiner sooner rather than later. They stopped upon spotting the second version of him in our midst. There was no need for anyone to explain. They understood the moment they laid eyes upon the imposter. That same instant I realized that the arm in my grip was slimming, like the flesh and bones were rapidly shrinking down to form a much thinner, shorter version of the limb. Before I could adjust my grip, the other Reuben had torn away from me, and within a mere split second, the rest of his body underwent a similar transformation. And before I knew it, a very short person was crouching on the ground before me. However, I could barely get a peek at it before it took off into the forest though, letting out a warped, ear-piercing shriek as it did. "It's getting away," Lottie cried out. Manuela thought differently. "Get him back to the others," she bellowed, already having started to run into the same direction as the creature. "Kitty, you're coming with me." And together we began chasing after the thing. We already couldn't see it anymore, but we had a rough idea on where it had gone. "You still have your gun, right?" I called over to her. "Yeah," she panted. "Can you see the thing?" Due to my hard breathing and the humidity, my glasses had fogged up a little, and for the moment, I couldn't see much of anything. "No, just keep going." I yelled back at her as I took my glasses off and still running, scrambled to try and wipe them off using my shirt. "I'm right behind you." To make a long story short, we lost sight of the shapeshifter. We came to a halt in the middle of the clearing, exhausted and nearly out of breath. "Dang it," Manuela hissed. "I can't believe this, come on, let's head back." "Sorry for slowing you down," I muttered. "No matter, it won't be the last that we see of it." Reuniting with the caravan, we found the others had been awaiting us. They had already gotten the rundown of what had happened from Frank and Lottie, and Manuela regretfully informed them that we hadn't managed to catch up with the shapeshifter. Reuben was sitting on the open bed of Rob's giant truck, Rose standing behind him. He was not a pretty sight. His eye had already begun to swell, and there was a small laceration on his upper lip, and his nose was bleeding. Rose was busy handing him fresh tissues every now and again. I walked up to the two of them and greeting them with a wave. "Hey," I said softly, "how you doing?" Reuben let out a pitiable groan as he lifted his head to look at me with only one healthy eye. "I'm okay," he grunted. "That little guy busted my lip, and I sincerely hope my face will stop leaking soon." "Your nose isn't broken, is it?" "No, it feels whole, but it keeps on dripping. Look at this here." He removed another deeply red tissue from his nose to replace it with a new one. "This is gonna be interesting, though. I've never had a black eye before. As for the lip, scars are considered hot, right?" "Totally," I said with a chuckle. At least this time we could be sure that it was really him. "So what happened back there?" "I don't know. I was standing there going about my business and then got hit over the back of the head. I got really dizzy and fell down. And then it hit me in the face some more and dragged me off into the dirt back there and... oh crap, that hurts." He replaced his tissue once again. "So, you didn't get it, did you?" "Nope, lost it in the woods." "Oh, no worries, it'll come back." "Well, most likely not for now," Frank chimed in. "But it'll definitely try something again in the next chance that it gets." He and the others had grouped up around us, looking solemn and more than a little shaken. "So where do we go from here?" Rose asked. "Any plans in particular?" "Well, I think we should try and drive the last stretch without taking any breaks. We really shouldn't stop and risk splitting up again. Once we're up in those mountains, it can't really get us by ourselves anymore. It'll be less of a threat then. So the next time that we take it on, we gotta do it together." Frank replied. "What do you guys think?" "That sounds good to me," Rob said. "Does everybody have enough supplies? I still have some snacks and cooled water over which I'd be happy to part with, just in case anybody needs them." "Getting there shouldn't be a problem. It's not too long anymore," Lottie assured him. "Well, good. So once we're there, we should start searching its hideout straight away. We'll all be tired, but we can't risk setting up camp and sleeping there with that thing still roaming around." Rob looked around the group, receiving nods of affirmation in response. "All right then. So if you can get rest during the ride, please do. And get yourselves fueled up, everyone. Speaking of fuel, we all have enough gas, correct? All right, great. Let's all stretch our legs a little bit and then take off again. After this, only stop if it's absolutely necessary, and you need to call us before you do. No one goes off on their own, not after this." He sighed deeply. "All right, let's say 15 minutes. We all walked off, mostly to and fro, movement just for the sake of it. After a few hours of sitting in the same place, you really don't feel your butt anymore, and I had learned to appreciate these little breaks immensely. Just before we got ready to depart for the final time, Lottie approached me with an almost wistful look on her face. "So this is it," she said. "We're almost there." "Yeah, it seems it." "Are you nervous?" About the shapeshifter, yes. About the mountains, no." Charlotte smiled. Same. No one's ever gonna believe us how we got here, you know. Just imagine us telling this story to our folks. They'll think that we're full of crap. She shook her head, letting out a high-pitched laugh. It sounded uneasy but amused, nevertheless. She then reached out, offering both her hands to me. When I took them, she squeezed mine like she always did. I'm very happy that you came along. It means a lot to have you here. Well, thanks, I'm glad that I came. Even after all this, I confirmed. Okay then, she replied. Letting go of my hands, she grinned and poked at the side of my glasses. Let's get you where you don't have to wear those anymore. Our departure was stern and stoic. Manuela reluctantly made way for Jessie in the driver's seat, sitting down in the back with me instead. She was simply too tired to keep going herself, as reaffirmed by the bags under her eyes and her constant yawning. Once she had gotten herself comfortable, she pretty much fell right asleep. Whether it was Jesse's style or perhaps the agitation still clinging to him, he drove slightly faster and less smoothly than Manuela. Not that it was a problem. As long as he didn't run us into anything, I figured the quicker that we made it to the mountains, the better. From time to time, I would turn around to look out the rear window to see if there was anything following us, but all that I would ever spot was the occasional glimpse at another car of the caravan. The air had gotten a lot cooler and fresher than it had been back when we weren't as far away from the city. The changing climate was palpable and our surroundings reflected that. The stretches of grassland that we would pass weren't dried out anymore, and rainwater had pooled in the depressions in the road. I watched as the mountains came closer and closer with every mile the caravan had advanced. Jesse was humming to himself, his spirits higher than before now that our destination was within plain sight. We're almost there, I remarked, my voice lowered in order to avoid waking up Manuela. Yeah, I suppose. I still can't believe it, really. Me neither. I can't wait. He gave me a quick smile in the rearview mirror. Yeah, we're gonna make this work. I was scared earlier, and I guess I still am, but I think that it'll be fine once we take care of our little problem. It was perfect timing. Just as those words had left his mouth, a gravelly, distorted howl came from somewhere behind us. My heart sank, but only for a moment. I looked over at Jesse to find that his face had hardened. There was a steely determination in his eyes, and he gave me a wide grin. I guess it's on then. Do not slow down, we've talked about this. Keep going, don't stop, I told Jesse, twisting around to look out the window. Relax, I got this. Can you see it anywhere? No, but there's Bill and Ruben right behind us. They're speeding and they must have heard it too. Well, stay calm, there's not much that it can do. It's only trying to creep us out. Well, it's working, I muttered. Yeah, I know, I hate that thing's voice, he shuddered. We gotta keep driving either way. Just ignore it. Maybe see if you can fall asleep like Manuela. Rob did tell us to rest after all. I shook my head, leaning back in my seat and pressing my cheek against the glass of the window on my side. I wouldn't be able to get my eyes shut, not like this. I was far too anxious. I stared off outside, watching the planes rush by as we passed them. Manuela let out a low snore beside me. The caravan was moving at a uniformly brisk pace, which it kept up even after the howl that we had heard had faded further into the backs of our minds. The road had continuously been taking us uphill, and I knew that we were getting closer. I watched the sky turning red, the sunset and finding nightfall through my little window, somehow forgetting all about mountains and distances and shapeshifters until suddenly, I noticed that the car was growing slower and slower until it rolled to a gentle stop. Here we are, made it in one piece, Jesse announced dryly as he rolled his shoulders and stretched his arms, preparing his most likely sore muscles for the effort of climbing out of the SUV. You all right back there? I'm good, I replied. I couldn't help but notice that I sounded surprised. Okay, wake up Manuela and then let's get to it. I nodded and leaned over to squeeze her shoulder, shaking her until she blinked and opened her mouth to yawn. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by a waft of clear, cool air. I greedily sucked it in. nothing the sweet, underlying scent of wood and grass that carried along with it. In the city, the air only ever smelt and felt like that right after it had been raining. I placed my feet on the ground and proceeded to shift my weight onto them with some difficulty. My butt was number than ever, and upon stretching, my back let out a few cracks of protest. I looked around. We truly were at the foot of a very large mountain, though when I say at its foot, it doesn't mean that we were level with the ground. The caravan had made its way up the hills that almost seemed to form an entrance to an enormous peak. From where I was standing, I could gaze down to see the lights of more than 3 towns in the distance, far below us from the looks of it. The land that Rob had purchased included a large, wide plain. I'd call it a lowland, but considering the height that we were at, that would probably be an insult to the place. Anyways, it was on the edge of that plain that we had parked into, were all presently crawling out of our cars like bugs from a damp and dark basement. Oh wow, this is like the mountains' welcome mat. The familiar voice of Reuben had caused me to whirl around. He had walked up to me from behind without me noticing, but for what it was worth, he himself appeared to be wholly occupied with his surroundings, taking in the view with one widened, second swollen up, a slightly narrowed eye. Eventually, he turned to face me. "It's nice here, isn't it?" I merely nodded. My stomach had begun to feel heavy with the dread pulling in its pit again. He was right, though. The mountains were nice. In fact, they might have been the prettiest thing that I had ever seen. But it was difficult to hold on to that admiration and enjoy it, while also knowing that there was something lurking in these parts that had not only been stalking and terrorizing our group, but also attempting to infiltrate us. Noticing my discomfort, Reuben placed his hand on my shoulder, and I raised my eyes to him once more. "What do you think it would have done if it had gotten away with pretending to be you back there?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow, even to myself. "I don't know." I swallowed. "You think it would have killed us, or tried to at least?" I just can't stop thinking about what it might have been planning. Maybe it wanted to pick us off one by one once we had gotten back out onto the road. Imagine that thing getting in the car with Bill. They would have been all alone. Reuben sighed. "You're right, bud. I'm not sure what to tell you. You best stop whacking your head about it. You're only scaring yourself, and besides, the important thing is that it didn't come to that. You found it out right." "I guess, but I won't take credit for that. It tried to lie its way through, but what it said, it didn't make sense, so it wasn't all that good of a disguise." "Yeah, but see, that's actually pretty great. We didn't let it trick us back there, and we won't let it trick us now, granted that it tries anything at all. The thing is, that stunt it pulled with you was probably just something it came up with on the fly. It happened spontaneously, you know. It saw you pull over and decided to simply make a move. I suppose I'm afraid that it might have had time to think now," I explained. "Look, we'll see all about that, all right. No use scaring yourself. It'll be fine, I'm sure. I just had that feeling." He squeezed my shoulder again and gave me a wide, reassuring smile, which he apparently regretted seeing as he winced and pressed a finger to the cut on his lip. Taking note of Rob waving us over, we walked up to him. What little confidence my chat with Reuben had given me, it rapidly faded when I saw our leader's expression. With a set jaw and stern eyes, Rob gave each of us a once-over, as if trying to assess if there was an imposter among us this time as well. Once he was satisfied, he motioned for us to come closer, and for a second I thought he wanted to initiate a team huddle. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. "My friends," he began, his voice lowered and even deeper than normal. "I was hoping to introduce you to this place under more cheerful circumstances. The troubles that we faced in the road were entirely unforeseen, and for that, I'm sorry. Aside from that, however, I would still like to welcome you all to your new home, as formally as our situation allows. I couldn't be happier to have you all here with me." His face softened considerably as once again, his eyes roamed the crowd. Fondly this time, and he looked genuinely grateful and relieved. "We do need to take care of the issue at hand first. You all know what needs to be done. Rob paused, searching our features for signs of approval. I nodded and so did Jesse, and the others gave murmured words of agreement. Rob smiled mirthlessly before carrying on. Thank you, I appreciate that. Now, I've thought about how to proceed, and I believe it would be best if we were to split up into 3 groups. 2 with 3 people and 1 with 4. That way, it will be too many for it to get bold and try to attack. We make sure there's a gun in every team, and then we go search the area. I don't know how far up into the mountains or how far down we might need to go, so I would like for one group to go down, another one to go up, and the third one to look here. If anyone finds anything, let the rest know right away, and then we'll all go there. Once again, quiet mutters of agreement followed. I turned to look over at Ruben. Can I come with you? You're good for my nerves. Sure, I figured. He puffed out his chest, looking pleased with himself. I was always good with Bluebell when she got skittish. You realize he's saying that you remind him of a horse, right? Bill chimed in. So you're with us. I guess that's for the best. For you, it'll be twice the security. Not saying you need it, but well, from what I heard, you kinda do. There was a bit of a condescending tone to his voice. I hated agreeing with him, but he undeniably had a point. I'm good at a lot of things, but wandering around in the dark isn't one of them, even with my glasses on. I was sort of night blind, so if there'd be something small and fast coming at me, I most likely wouldn't see it until it would be too late. I sighed, nodding. Yeah, I guess it'll be better. Okay then, let's do this. Let's go. Rob, we'll be searching the plane, all right? Bill shouted out, and Rob gave him an acknowledging wave. He then went to grab a large, heavy-duty flashlight from one of his bags in Ruben's truck, which he handed to me upon his return. You want to light the way? I fumbled around for the switch on the torch, and upon turning it on, it cast a bright beam of light that cut sharply through the darkness ahead. Ready, I muttered. So, where would a thing like that hide? Ruben asked. Well, if I had to guess, I'd say a cave or a burrow. Something like a rabbit hole. I know our shapeshifter isn't an animal, but it's reclusive, so it's gonna want to stay somewhere that no one goes. I thought aloud. We should start looking over there at the edge of the plain, where it kind of breaks off and meets with the mountain. If there's caves here, I think they'd be there. Afterwards, we can still look for any holes that it might have dug. I pointed the flashlight at the spot that I had described. All right, good thinking, Bill said. But no one talks from now on. It might be home. It'll hear us coming either way, but we should still keep it down. And with that, we headed for the far side of the plain. It was about a 10-minute walk until we were standing in front of the mountain and gazing up at it. It almost seemed to melt into the night sky. I let the beam of light travel the rough, rocky wall as we began walking alongside it. I stayed between the 2 men, always a little behind them. I had been wearing my glasses for a long time at that point, causing a throbbing pain to form behind my forehead and eyes. Guys, I'm gonna take my glasses off for a few minutes, I announced in a hushed and nervously breathy voice. You sure? Bill asked. What with us looking for caves and holes here? I know, try to keep me from falling into anything if you can, but I really need to, my head's killing me. I slid them off my nose and held them out to a much blurrier looking Ruben. Put them in your pocket, please. He nodded, taking them from me and stowing them away somewhere in his shirt. I looked around, giving my new surroundings a tentative once-over. I couldn't see much of anything anymore, but for some reason I liked it. I could walk just fine, seeing as all I had to do was stay close to Ruben and Bill. And the ground was flat and even, so there wasn't much I could have tripped on. So it's working, I remember thinking. We kept searching along the side of the mountain until suddenly, after about 20 minutes, Ruben uttered a low, "Hey," and pointed at a spot up ahead of us. That looks like a cave right there. I couldn't see it properly and was about to shine the flashlight at it, but Bill had stopped me. We don't know what's in there. It could be our stalker or maybe some animal. You better stay here and wait, the 2 of us are gonna go. He took back his flashlight and motioned to Ruben. Wait, I hissed. Get back here. It'll only be a moment, Reuben whispered. We'll just go up there and take a look inside and then come back and call the others, okay? That's all, we're not leaving you here. Fine, but hurry, I urged them, gesturing for the two men to get going. I watched them march off, or rather what little I could still see of them. I could have asked for my glasses back before they left, but that only came to mind when they were already heading to the cave entrance. I was left standing alone in the darkness, with only the insects chirping in the grass to keep me company. After about 2 minutes, I took a couple cautious steps up to the rock wall and leaned against it. After another 5, I sat on the ground. I was beginning to get worried. Hadn't they said they only wanted to take a quick peek inside? Picking up a low rustling noise in the bushes a little off to my right, I turned my head. Of course, I couldn't see a thing, but I still tried to make out the source of the sound until giving up and deciding that it had to be a small critter. But then finally I heard footsteps approaching, though not from the direction of the cave. I jumped to my feet, immediately on high alert. "Who's there?" I shouted out. For a few seconds, there was no answer. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. And then eventually it came. "No, just me." It's strange hearing your own voice. I've always thought that it was intriguing to hear what I sound like to others, so whenever I send people audio messages, I play them back for myself to listen to. That's how I know my own voice. If it weren't for that, I'm not sure if I would have recognized it right away, but I did and froze on the spot. My mind raced, but I knew what was going on. There was only one way that this was happening after all. My thoughts were confirmed when a person appeared right in front of me. A woman, blurry like everything else, but recognizable nonetheless. Her dark red sweater, her black leggings, and those flashy white sneakers. They were just like mine. I even briefly glanced down at myself to check. This was a weird situation. I didn't know what to say or do, but to have this thing impersonate me, it could only mean one thing. It wanted to make its way into our group again, and to do that, it would have to get rid of me first. "Don't you dare come any closer," I began, somehow managing to muster up some courage for my voice to sound firm. As though edged on by my demand, the other me took a step towards me and then another. Trying to get some distance between us, I pressed myself up against the rock behind me, but that didn't keep it from closing in on me. I didn't have a choice. I wasn't going to wait for it to attack. Gritting my teeth, I lunged at it, but the thing simply stepped aside. I nearly tripped and fell, but caught myself just in time. Before I could turn around, however, I felt a cold hand wrap around the back of my neck. It's, or rather my own fingertips, digging into my skin. I let out a pained whine as it forced me onto my knees. I struggled in its grip, trying to get a hold of its arms or land a punch somewhere, but I couldn't. It was still behind me, and while I wasn't sure how it was planning on subduing me, I didn't want to wait and find out. Instead, I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air before letting out the loudest, most ear-piercing shriek of my entire life. It lasted for several seconds, and even the creature seemed stunned by it. I began to scream for Reuben and Bill, blindly thrashing around in the creature's arms until it let go of me and I tumbled down onto all fours. Brushing myself off and rising to my feet, I suddenly became aware of rapid footsteps approaching, and a bright flashlight beam illuminating myself and the imposter. "Ah, heck," Bill growled as he handed the torch to Reuben and reached for his gun. "All right, ladies, and neither of you move." "You shouldn't have left me here," the creature spoke up. It sounded convincingly upset, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Oh, thank God you came back in time." "No, that's the fake one," I protested, pointing at the other me. "I was sitting right there and it was hiding in the bushes, and then it came out and it looked like me. You have to believe me." Bill and Reuben stepped a little closer to one another. I couldn't make out the looks on their faces, but they seemed to be whispering to one another. "I'm Kitty," I tried again. "I'm the real one, I swear to God." I found myself at a loss for words. I mean, what was I supposed to say? How could I ever prove to them that I was telling the truth? They hadn't seen the creature come out and attack me, and now that they were here, The imposter wouldn't try to get rid of me again, but if Ruben and Bill would end up thinking that I wasn't the real one, well, they wouldn't have to. I was thinking feverishly, persuading them by sharing some personal knowledge that would be useless. The shapeshifter had access to our memories, maybe even some very recent ones. There was a chance that it would know whatever I knew and try to do the same. Bill and Ruben would most likely not give it credence either way. I was beginning to grow desperate. "Shoot it already!" The other me snapped at the man. "Hurry before it starts running away again." "Just shut up, both of you," Bill shouted, and I detected a hint of fearful confusion in his voice. He leaned over to Ruben again. The latter had tucked the flashlight under his arm and was fidgeting with something that I couldn't see. They murmured amongst themselves again, and I restlessly shifted my weight from one foot to the other, my hand shaking and my lip quivering. Meanwhile, the imposter stood unmoved, cold and confident, keeping up a facade of seething anger. "Hurry," she urged them. "Please." "Yeah, okay," Ruben replied, sounding resigned. He took a few steps towards us, and at the first, I felt a spark of hope, until he took a sharp turn towards me, grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. I let out a high-pitched whimper. "Please don't," I uttered, my voice shaking. "It's me, it's really me." I felt hot tears start to roll down my face. This was it. He didn't believe me, he would shoot me. Ruben would actually shoot me. And then suddenly, I felt his breath on the side of my face. "Relax. I know," he whispered. Puzzled, I tried to turn to look at him, but even though he was close, I couldn't make out his expression through the veil of my tears. And then I heard the gunshot, followed by that ungodly ear-piercing howl. Ruben let go of me in an instant, and I spun around to find Bill, standing over the figure that seemed to bend and shrink, its bones cracking audibly as it writhed on the ground. He shot at it again and then again and again, and the creature's spasms grew stronger and more agonized. It wasn't trying to flee. It seemed to be unable to. It was still alive though, way too alive. "Try the head," Ruben bellowed, drawing his own gun and opening fire. Finally, the thing's twitches died down and both men lowered their weapons. "Is it dead?" I breathed, staggering forward to grab onto Ruben's arm. He took in a sharp breath. "I don't know," he said quietly. "It might be faking it. Bill, could you take its pulse or something?" "Not sure if a thing like that's even supposed to have a pulse. I've got an idea though, Ruben. Kitty, pick it up. We'll take it back to the others." He tucked his gun away and fumbled for his phone. I heard him talk with someone else from the caravan, presumably Rob, as Ruben and I cautiously approached the unmoving creature. I thought that I could hear him mention the words "fire" and "big," but my main concern at the time was a different one. Ruben and I contemplated how to carry the shapeshifter, and agreed that we would each take 2 of its limbs so in case it would come back to life, we would have it under control. Before we actually did that though, he gave me back my glasses. It was one of those rare occasions on which I was glad to reunite with them. It was also the first time that I got a proper look at the creature. Even today I find it nearly indescribable, but I suppose it mostly resembled a fusion between a monkey and a very small human, but with a very crooked spine, long, spindly fingers, and remarkably small black chips for teeth, which protruded from its mouth. It didn't seem to have lips as its gums were exposed, and appeared to meld right into its face. It was partially covered in patches of short, wiry fur, and its skin was mangy and scabby. It was about the size of a dog and standing up. Its head would have most likely reached up to my thighs. As a whole, it was an utterly repulsive sight, but much less frightening now that I had had the opportunity to really examine it. Ruben seemed to have the same thought as he grabbed it by both wrists and lifted it up, me doing the same with its ankles. "Now that I've seen it, it's not that scary anymore for some reason," he remarked. "Maybe that's just because it's so still. And maybe..." We made our way back to the center of the plane in silence and dropped the creature on the ground a few feet away from the cars. "How'd you know that it was me, by the way?" I asked, gently poking the shapeshifter's side with the tip of my shoe. Reuben laughed awkwardly. "I took a pretty risky guess, but it was because you kept squinting at us. There were 2 kitties and only one could actually see us, and it absolutely wasn't you." I was astounded. Who knew being nearsighted would one day indirectly save my skin? I had barely finished that thought when I felt 2 arms wrap themselves around me from behind. "Oh, thank God you're okay," Lottie cried out, spinning me around and cupping my face with her hands. "Bill told us everything over the phone. We came right away." Nodding over at her husband, who was carrying a whole bunch of twigs and branches, she added, "We found kindling too. It should burn nicely." "Bill wants to burn that thing?" "Yeah, it's a great idea. If you ask me, I'll only rest assured it's dead once there's nothing left of it." And I wholeheartedly agreed. Lottie went to help Frank start the fire and I walked over to Bill. "Hey, you okay?" I inquired. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" "Well, you went a little overboard with the shooting back there and now the fire. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I was just thinking that you might be upset." Bill shrugged. For a few seconds he said nothing, and when he spoke again his voice sounded a bit choked up. "I shouldn't have dragged my little girl into this." I figured it would be best to leave him alone. I waited for the others to light the fire, and once they had done so, it wasn't long until the flames were burning up high. It was just large enough to throw on the shapeshifter, and Jesse got to do the honors. He grabbed the thing and with a grossed out look on his face, hurled it into the blazing heat. We watched it burn together, all of us standing around the fire staring into it, with a mix of disbelief and satisfaction on our faces. After a couple of hours we had put it out, and when we did, there wasn't much left of the shapeshifter. "So that's it," Manuela said to me. She had been standing by my side in silence, looking tired and relieved. "We're home for real now." And she was right. Our life in the mountains had been off to a rocky start, but once we all knew the creature that had inhabited them wasn't a threat anymore, it was like a huge weight had been lifted off of our shoulders. We set up our tents on a cheerful note and went to sleep knowing that we had arrived, and it was a wonderful feeling. It's been a year since all this took place, so a lot has changed since then. We don't sleep in tents anymore. There's a house on the plain in the mountains now, a very big house which belongs to all of us. It took around 8 months to build, with everyone helping and Rob hiring workers to come up here for the more difficult parts of the job. It's not like we spent those 8 months entirely in our tents. Rob owns a hotel in the town over, so we would have rooms there too. Now that the house has been finished for a while, we're basically living door to door in adjacent rooms, which sounds annoying but is actually pretty fun. Currently, the others are working on a sheep barn and stables for horses. Bill, Frank, Rob, Reuben, Jesse, and Lottie do most of the work on the buildings here, and the rest of us have already taken on work in the aforementioned town. I cook at Rob's hotel these days, and it's a lovely place, really fancy, and the pay is amazing, and my coworkers are great. They jokingly call us the Mountain Men, and it's become a running gag with us. Manuela has been selling her paintings again. She mostly works with watercolors, and her stuff looks pretty great. I'm not the only one who thinks that, seeing as she's getting into galleries all the time. She says that it isn't a big deal, but I think it is. Myrna works in a boutique, and Rose keeps herself busy with the odd part-time job until Credence Ridge will be ready to harbor sheep. That's what we called our home on the plain, by the way, Credence Ridge. I don't know for sure, but I think it was Lottie who came up with it. She's always been good at naming things. I got a call from Nico about a month ago. It came out of nowhere, and he asked if I would like to meet up for coffee. I politely declined because, for one, getting there and back would take me over a week, and also because I really didn't want to. I think it was only when I ended the call that I realized for how long that I hadn't thought of him at all. Last year, I'd never thought that I would get over him, so that was pretty great. As for my glasses, I don't even know where they are right now. I wear contacts in the kitchen, but I take them out as soon as I get home. My room at Credence Ridge is big and bright, with all the furniture pushed up against the wall, so I don't have to worry about tripping over anything. And thanks to Rob, it's the same with the other open rooms in the house, so I don't have to see it all that well to get around. I spend most of my spare time hanging out with Lottie and the others outside. We can't get enough of the mountain air. On some days, it smells so sweet and fresh that it's almost heady. Even after a year, Jesse's still raving about how amazing it is up here. He's always been the one to show the most enthusiasm, but we all feel that way. A year ago, I would have never guessed that coming here would be such a good decision, but it really was. Maybe even the best one I've ever made.